Mes chers collègues, toutes mes excuses pour ce retard. La séance est ouverte. Afin que votre présence soit bien enregistrée lorsque vous prenez place dans l'hémicycle, je vous rappelle que vous devez insérer votre badge et le laisser en place pendant au moins 30 secondes. Vous devez également l'insérer pour pouvoir prendre la parole ou voter. Pour demander la parole, veuillez appuyer sur le bouton « Request ». En outre, comme indiqué ce matin, je vous rappelle que les membres n'ayant pas soumis de déclaration annuelle d'intérêt devront commencer leur intervention par une déclaration d'intérêt orale, conformément au paragraphe 20 du Code de conduite des membres de l'Assemblée parlementaire. L'ordre du jour appelle maintenant la présentation et la discussion du rapport de Madame Kate Osborne, intitulé, je cite, « Pour une interdiction des pratiques de conversion », fin de citation, au nom de la Commission sur l'égalité et la non-discrimination. Nous entendrons ensuite Madame Helena Dalli, ancienne commissaire européenne à l'égalité, ancienne ministre des Affaires européennes et de l'égalité de Malte. Nous devrons en avoir terminé avec l'examen de ce texte, vote inclus vers 18h25. Nous devrons donc interrompre la liste des orateurs vers 17h55 afin de pouvoir entendre la réplique de la Commission et de procéder au vote. Madame la rapporteure, vous disposez de 7 minutes pour la présentation de votre rapport et de 3 minutes pour répondre aux orateurs à la fin de la discussion générale. Madame la rapporteure Osborne, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I start by paying tribute to Dr. Dalli, who will address us shortly, and thank her again for the time and expertise she shared with us over the last few years and for leading the way with Malta, banning conversion practices 10 years ago, as well as for addressing the side meeting earlier today. Dear colleagues, I want to thank all my fellow members of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination for unanimously adopting the draft resolution we are debating today, and to the Secretariat, especially Giorgio. These conversion practices that lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender persons, often young people, still face are alarming. They range from pseudo-medical treatments to threats, verbal abuse, social isolation, physical and sexual violence, including rape and psychological violence, often in the form of coercive controls, threats of deportation or forced marriage. I want to begin with something that can sometimes get lost in discussion and debate. This is not theoretical. This is not about abstract principles. This is about people, real people. People who have been pressured, coerced, shamed, isolated, threatened and abused. People who have been harmed. People who I met who have shared with me the damage that conversion practices have done to them, to their physical health, to their mental health, to their ability to have relationships and to live without fear or shame of who they are. That is at the heart of the most fundamental and basic rights to live and thrive. This is also about whether Europe's leading human rights institution, the Council of Europe, will address that harm with the seriousness and action it deserves. It was harrowing to hear testimonies that right now people still suffer from these practices, up to and including electric shock therapy. We need to call these abhorrent practices what they are: abuse. People think that this is not happening anymore, that these abusive practices are a thing of the past, but we have found that it is happening everywhere, including in my country, in the UK. The report I present today uses recent data collected by the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights and by civil society organisations based in the United Kingdom or operating Europe-wide, such as ILGA Europe, who I would also like to thank for their help. The report makes clear conversion practices are deliberately designed attempts to change, repress, suppress or erase someone's sexual orientation, gender identity or gender expression based on the false belief that such core aspects of a person's identity are pathological or undesirable or somehow able to change. Sometimes they are sold as therapy, sometimes as counselling, sometimes as prayer, deliverance or guidance. Sometimes they don't even have a name at all. The damage these abusive practices can cause lasts a lifetime. In the UK Parliament, we heard evidence from people in their teenage years who had recently suffered conversion practices, people in their midlife and people in their retirement who had suffered these practices decades ago. The abuse spanned generations. These practices harm society as a whole by conveying the message that there is something wrong, something that needs to be cured or changed about being a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender or intersex. There is not. I do not need to be cured. I am what I am and I am proud of it and proud to be bringing this report to protect LGBTI people. In many Council of Europe's member states, professional organisations of medical doctors, including psychiatrists and psychologists, have banned conversion practices. This is an important step in the right direction and significantly strengthens protections against this danger and puts paid to the lie that a ban would stop people getting emotional help. This is not about banning therapy, emotional support, or any other truly genuine health need, but about banning abuse. The recommendations in the report are based on the experience of several Council of Europe member states, starting with Malta, of course, who led the way, and including France and Germany. Other member states are expected to follow, including the UK, who should be bringing forward legislation in the next few months. The report has been carefully crafted to achieve consensus, and I would like to thank everyone who met with me to engage in a constructive way to achieve consensus on this report at the Equalities Committee. I'm aware that people have been emailed misinformation about the impact on professionals and parents and various other claims. So I was pleased to work with colleagues and members from other political groups to accept an amendment to the report to ensure we have clarity. So let me just be clear in my speech, this report will prevent abuse. The independence of qualified clinicians providing gender identity healthcare services to adults, young people and or children will not be affected by a conversion practices ban. Similarly, in terms of parents or religious institutions playing a role in supporting exploration of sexual orientation and gender identity will not be impacted. Those supportive conversations, of course, should happen. Bans on conversion practices respect the right of parents to provide support to their children, to help them through it, to have discussions. Crucially, though, they also protect children from the harm that conversion practices can cause when parents are involved in these practices, as is sometimes the case. Then, of course, we've seen attempts to remove gender identity from protection. That is not acceptable. Attempts to strip gender identity from protection are deliberate. They would leave trans people, including young people, uniquely exposed to practices already recognised as abusive elsewhere. That is not safeguarding, that is abandonment. The report before you includes concrete measures. It makes a solemn reference to a fundamental principle, the need to uphold personal autonomy as protected under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which guarantees the right to respect for private and family life. This right includes the freedom to make autonomous decisions about one's life and to live our lives as we are, regardless of our sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression and sexual characteristics. And I call on all members of this Assembly to support this text.
Merci Madame la rapporteure. J'ai maintenant le plaisir d'accueillir Madame Elena Dalli, ancienne commissaire européenne à l'égalité, ancienne ministre des Affaires européennes et de l'égalité de Malte. Madame Dalli, Madame la ministre, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, President, distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly, colleagues. Today, this Assembly is faced with a choice that goes to the core of Europe's identity. a report on conversion practices, practices that seek to change, suppress, or erase a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. Let us say this without euphemism. These practices are a form of abuse. They are grounded in a lie, the lie that diversity is a defect. They are sustained by stigma, and they persist only because institutions and states have allowed them to persist. Science has rejected them. Medical and psychological professionals have condemned them. Survivors have testified again and again to the harm that they cause. Trauma, depression, shame, loss of self-worth, and an unacceptably high risk of self-harm and suicide. And yet across Europe, conversion practices continue. Behind closed doors, under new names, shielded by silence, and too often imposed on children and young people who are sometimes powerless to refuse. This is not a legacy issue. It is not a marginal issue. It is a failure of protection happening now. When I served as Minister for Equality in Malta, we faced the same choice that confronts many states today, whether to act decisively or whether to look away. In 2016, Malta became the first country in Europe to outlaw conversion practices. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. We acted because human dignity does not defend itself. It requires the protection of law. Our legislation was clear, proportionate, and principled. It did not criminalize belief. It did not interfere with legitimate therapeutic support. What it did was establish a non-negotiable boundary. No one has the right to deny another person's identity. That boundary matters because when the law is silent, abuse fills its space. Let us look at the arguments that are still used today to delay action and why they no longer withstand scrutiny. Consent does not legitimize harm. Human rights law has never accepted consent as a justification for degrading or abusive treatment. We reject it elsewhere, and we must reject it here. Freedom of religion is a fundamental right, but it has never been absolute. It has never included the right to subject others, especially children, to practices that cause lasting harm. Belief is protected, abuse is not. This is not a new principle, it is a settled one. What is new and increasingly indefensible is the continued hesitation of states in the face of overwhelming evidence. The report makes it unmistakably clear. Conversion practices violate the European Convention on Human Rights. They undermine the right to private life, to bodily and psychological integrity, to freedom from inhuman or degrading treatment, and to equality and non-discrimination. It is in the most severe cases, they put lives at risk. When states fail to act, they are not neutral. They are enabling harm. They are failing in their duty of care. Fragmented protection across Europe is not an accident. It is the result of political choice. And as long as those choices persist, conversion practices will continue to exploit legal gaps, move across borders, and adapt to avoid accountability, including online. This is precisely why the Council of Europe exists. Not to wait for consensus at the lowest level, but to set standards worthy of our values. The report of Kate Osborne does exactly that. It does not ask politely. It demands clarity, courage, and action. Comprehensive bans, real enforcement, professional accountability, support for survivors, education to dismantle the stigma that makes these practices possible in the first place. This is the moment to be honest with ourselves. Either Europe affirms unequivocally that diversity in sexual orientation and gender identity is part of the human condition, or it tolerates practices that treat it as a pathology. There is no middle ground. There is no neutral position. Delay is a decision. Silence is a choice. Future generations will not ask whether this was politically convenient. They will ask whether we acted when we knew. I strongly welcome this report and commend Kate Osborne for her leadership and resolve. I call on this Assembly and on every member state to move beyond statements of principle and into decisive action. No one in Europe should be told that who they are is something to be fixed. No one should be harmed in the name of therapy. And no state should claim fidelity to human rights while allowing these practices to continue. This is a test of Europe's moral leadership. Let us not fail it. A Europe that protects human dignity cannot tolerate practices that deny it. If we know these practices cause harm and still allow them, then the harm becomes our responsibility. Because no child should grow up believing they are broken. No adult should be told that their identity is a mistake. And no democracy should ever confuse abuse with care. History will not remember the excuses we made. It will remember whether Europe had the courage to say clearly and finally, this ends here. Thank you.
Madame Dalli, je vous remercie pour votre discours qui a vivement intéressé les membres de notre Assemblée et nous passons maintenant à la discussion générale. Je rappelle que la durée d'intervention est limitée à 3 minutes par orateur et nous passons donc à la parole à Monsieur Stamatis du groupe EPP.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, dear ex-Commissioner Dalli, thank you once again for your inspiration speech. And I think we are very lucky here because we have teenagers that look here for us, because we are here not for us, but we are here for them. And for this crucial, I think that the report before us today aims to safeguard the freedom, dignity, personality, and self-determination of individuals who are at risk at becoming victims of conversion practices. The conversion practices are not therapies. They are attempts to suppress or change a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression based on the false and deeply harmful belief that these aspects of human identity are pathological or undesirable. These practices may include psychological or behavioral counseling, spiritual and religious rituals, aversion methods, as well as verbal abuse, isolations, forced medications, electric shocks, physical and sexual abuse. We welcome this report that clearly demonstrates that conversion practices have no scientific basis and causes serious harm. Victims experience fear, psychological trauma, depression, and in many cases, suicide thoughts or attempts. As it clearly illustrates in this report, conversion practices violate the very principle in the European Convention on Human Rights, including the right to private life, to autonomy, and freedom from inhuman or degrading treatment. We are also deeply concerned that despite growing awareness, conversion practices persist across Council of Europe member states, often hidden from public view, and sometimes operating across borders to evade national bans. It emphasized the need to integrate these bans into a broader anti-discrimination strategies and to ensure proper monitoring and reporting mechanism. It is of major importance that the report highlights the necessity of education, awareness raising, and professional training, so that health workers, educators, social services, and others have a role on this. By supporting, dear colleagues, the resolution, we send a clear message. There is nothing to cure, nothing to erase, and nothing to be ashamed of in being who you are. In the light of this evidence, I call you to vote this report in order to ensure that our shared commitment to human dignity is translated into real protection for those at risk. And finally, dear Kate, I would like to thank you on behalf of EPP for accepting our amendment that guarantee the rights of parents, priests, and doctors. Counsel and advice is not the same than pressure. Thank you.
La parole est à Monsieur Bob Brabander du groupe CEPA.
Dear colleagues, let me be clear at the outset. Coercion, abuse, and violence have no place in any society. That principle is not in dispute. What is in dispute is that this resolution does not confine itself to banning abuse. It establishes far-reaching ideological framework that intrudes deeply into medicine, education, family life, and freedom of thought. It is quite simply based on ideological wishful thinking, not in scientific facts. The resolution deliberately broadens the concept of conversion practices beyond sexual orientation to include gender identity and gender expression. These concepts, particularly when applied to children and adolescents, are neither medically settled nor universally defined. Yet the text treats them as unquestionable facts and labels them any form of exploration, hesitation, or non-affirmation as harmful. That is not evidence-based policy, that is dogmatic legislation. Also troubling is the fact that there is a call for criminal sanctions under this expanded definition. The resolution explicitly frames disbelieving, denying, or ignoring a person's declared gender identity as a form of conversion practice. In practice, this places parents, therapists, teachers, social workers under legal suspicion for exercising caution or parental responsibility. Criminal law should protect against abuse, not enforce ideological conformity. The resolution also imposes state-mandated training and alignment across virtually all sectors of society, schools, health services, and so on. It prescribes what may be taught, how professionals must act, and which views are acceptable. Disagreement is no longer treated as part of legitimate democratic debate, but redefined as misinformation or harm. And finally, the resolution fails to seriously address its own unintended consequences. It will discourage therapists from working with children suffering from gender dysphoria. It will silence careful, exploratory, and individualized care. And it will harm precisely those it claims to protect, including lesbian and gay youth. A serious ban on abusive practices requires legal precision, proportionality, and respect for pluralism. This resolution offers none of these. It replaces protection with coercion and care with ideology. For those reasons, we will vote against this resolution. And I urge anyone from the other groups who even slightly agrees with me on the issues I presented to do the same. Because if you do not, I think we will need to consider a new report on political dysphoria. Because when you vote for this resolution, you are not Christian, you are not conservative, you are not center-right, and you are not defending families, parents, and children. You might tell yourself that you are, but that still does not make it true, and society will not need to accept that. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Andris Griffoy du groupe ALDE.
Colleagues, conversion practices is a broad term for therapies aimed at turning someone away from their natural sexual orientation. For a long time, some people were told that who they loved or how they understood themselves was a mistake, something that needed fixing. Conversion practices grew out of that belief. They promised change, certainty, relief. What they often delivered instead was fear, shame, and silence. People entered these programs hoping to be accepted by their families, their faith communities, or society. Many were young. Many didn't really choose it. They were told that if they tried hard enough, prayed enough, endured enough, they could become someone else. And when that didn't happen, the fear was blamed on them. Over time, doctors, psychologists, and survivors began to tell the same story from different angles. These practices don't change who someone is, but they can break someone inside them. Anxiety deepens, self-trust erodes. The message sinks in that love is conditional and identity is a flaw. As science advanced, another truth became clear. Being LGBTQ+ isn't an illness. There is nothing medically or psychologically wrong that needs correcting. So the idea of treatment stopped making sense. What remained was harm. And bans on conversion practices came from that realization. They aren't about policing belief or silencing religion. They are about drawing a line where harm begins. Society already does this in many places. We don't allow medical treatments that don't work and injure people, even if someone sincerely believes in them. At its heart, the ban says something simple but powerful. People should not be punished for being themselves, especially when they are at their most vulnerable. Protection, not punishment, is the goal. And that's why we have already banned in some parliaments, for example, also like in Belgium, conversion practices because they are cruel, unsafe, unscientific, and severely harmful, with dramatic consequences in their well-being and emotional balance. There is no doubt we must protect people and erase these practices aimed at suppressing human beings' identities. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Fernandez de la GUE.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, le rapport qui nous est présenté aujourd'hui sur l'interdiction des pratiques de conversion est un rapport essentiel, courageux et malheureusement toujours nécessaire, et mon groupe félicite et remercie la rapporteure, Madame Osborne. Il ne peut y avoir aucune ambiguïté, les pratiques de conversion sont incompatibles avec les droits humains, avec la dignité humaine et avec l'égalité réelle entre toutes et tous. Comme le rappelle ce rapport, les pratiques de conversion sont non seulement infondées scientifiquement, mais profondément abjectes, cruelles, intolérables. Ces pratiques sont des violences psychologiques, spirituelles, parfois physiques et sexuelles, qui provoquent des traumatismes durables, des dépressions, des syndromes de stress post-traumatique et une augmentation dramatique des risques suicidaires, en particulier chez les enfants et chez les jeunes. La France a pris une responsabilité importante en adoptant en janvier 2022 une loi interdisant les pratiques de conversion. C'est un pas évidemment salutaire et nous le défendons, nous le portons ici également. Mais ce rapport le montre clairement. Interdire ne suffit pas si l'on ne protège pas réellement. Les pratiques se déplacent, se dissimulent, se réinventent, notamment dans des cadres familiaux, religieux ou transnationaux. Le combat contre ces pratiques barbares ne peut s'arrêter à cette loi. Sans formation obligatoire des professionnels, sans évaluation sérieuse de son application et sans investissement dans la recherche, l'interdiction restera partielle et les victimes continueront d'être invisibilisées. Ce combat ne peut pas s'arrêter à nos frontières, il est aussi un combat politique plus large. Je tiens à saluer le succès de l'initiative citoyenne européenne sur l'interdiction des pratiques de conversion dans l'Union européenne, qui a réuni plus d'1 200 000 signataires et marque une avancée majeure pour les droits des personnes concernées. Et nous espérons désormais un examen favorable, rapide de la part de la Commission. Les pratiques de conversion prospèrent là où les discours réactionnaires gagnent du terrain, là où l'on remet en cause les droits des personnes LGBTI, là où les identités deviennent des cibles idéologiques. Partout en Europe, le recul des droits des personnes LGBTI grandit avec la montée de l'extrême droite. Nous le voyons malheureusement de manière très claire en Hongrie notamment. Le mariage et l'adoption pour toutes y sont interdits, les contenus pro-LGBTI censurés, la Pride interdite. Ce ne sont pas de simples décisions administratives, évidemment, ce sont des actes politiques assumés, des messages de haine envoyés à toute une communauté et à l'humanité entière. Ces lois toujours plus liberticides créent un climat de peur et de stigmatisation. Elles légitiment les violences, encouragent l'émergence de groupes transphobes et homophobes et ouvrent un terrain fertile à des pratiques de conversion présentées comme des réponses prétendument légitimes à des identités que l'on cherche à effacer. L'offensive anti-LGBTI se répand à travers l'Europe, nourrie par des discours de haine, des législations discriminatoires et des attaques coordonnées. Nous défendrons donc évidemment ce rapport et cette résolution parce qu'il n'y a rien à convertir, rien à guérir, mais tout à protéger. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Monsieur Fernandez. La parole est à Monsieur Michael Farrugia du groupe socialiste.
Thank you very much. Up to the beginning of the 20th century, LGBTQI persons were considered as criminals. In 1920, LGBTIQ plus persons were then considered as not criminals, but suffering from mental illness. It was this time when research started on how to best cure this illness. In 1987, the American Psychiatric Association declared LGBTIQ plus persons as not mentally ill. The World Health Organization in 1990 took homosexuality off the mental diseases list. In 2004, the British Psychoanalytic Council issued a consensus statement that conversion therapy is not only unnecessary, but has the potential to cause harm. Current evidence-based medical and clinical guidance is that homosexuality, bisexuality, and gender variance are natural and healthy aspects of human sexuality. Malta in 2016 was the first European country to make conversion therapy illegal. Since then, other countries followed. In 2020, the United Nations independent experts on sexual orientation and gender identity called for a global ban on conversion therapy. Conversion therapy, sometimes called reparative therapy, is a range of dangerous and discredited practices that falsely claim to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity and expression. Such practices have for decades been rejected by every mainstream medical and mental health organizations. Conversion therapy affects negatively the well-being of LGBTIQ plus persons. Minors are especially more vulnerable. Literatures by renowned medical authorities and experts showed that persons who underwent conversion therapy were more susceptible to mental illness, mental disorders, drug use, homelessness, suicide, ideation, and suicide attempts. This document in no way stops persons or parents from seeking professional advice to understand one's gender identity. This is not, and I underline, not conversion therapy, and it is not banned. In addition, professional support is sometimes necessary both for those not sure of their gender identity, sexual orientation, or gender expression, but also to those around them. I, as a medical doctor, honoring the Hippocratic Oath not to do harm but to seek the best interest and treatment to my patients, voted to ban conversion therapy in my country, Malta. And now I urge you all, in the name of the Socialist Democrats and Greens group, to support with your vote in favor of this document that sets the reason and legislative framework for banning conversion therapy across Europe. Thank you, Kate, for pushing forward as rapporteur this well-written and researched document. Thank you.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur Farrugia. Nous poursuivons maintenant avec la liste des orateurs. La parole est à Baroness Ruth Hunt.
So-called conversion practices are real. They cause harm. They are based on the false idea that who a person is can or should be changed. That is why they must be stopped. I often describe three kinds of response people receive when they speak about their sexual orientation or gender identity: affirmative, curious, and furious. An affirmative response listens, respects, and supports. Excuse me a moment. I'm so sorry, you're very loud. Would you mind keeping your voice down a little bit? Thank you. An affirmative response listens, respects, and supports. A curious response is also caring. It asks questions, explores, and allows space for reflection without pressure. A furious response shames, rejects, or humiliates. Sometimes this is hate crime, and we have laws that condemn such things. Many of us will recognize all three. I have experienced all three. I have not experienced conversion practices. Conversion practices are something else. They are not curiosity. They are not careful clinical assessment. They are not parents trying, sometimes imperfectly, to understand their children. Conversion practices are directional and coercive and have a predetermined outcome. They involve an attempt by someone in a position of power or trust to force an identity outcome, to change or suppress a person through pressure, manipulation, or abuse. That is the line, and it is right that we draw it. I want to say something personal. I'm a lesbian. Even standing here in Europe's Human Rights Assembly, it feels risky to say that out loud. That should give us pause, because if it feels difficult here, imagine what it feels like for young people in families, schools, or communities where they are already uncertain or afraid. We need to tell them that they belong, that there is nothing to cure. We can protect open conversation. We can protect proper clinical care. We can value parental love, while being equally clear that coercion and identity suppression are unacceptable. There is nothing to cure. Thank you.
La parole est à Monsieur Ronan Mullen.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Chairman. We hear more and more about the danger of giving puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones to children with gender dysphoria, and the health and happiness destroying effects of mutilating surgeries. Those are among the real conversion therapies. But this report doesn't condemn those. Instead, it encourages a circling of the wagons around these practices, threatening to criminalise and exclude parents, teachers, counsellors and medical professionals who might want to help steer beloved children away from this toxic train wreck. We'll be hearing more with all the emerging litigation by detransitioners that may be coming down the track. Medical experts in Ireland who have assisted adults with trans ideation point nevertheless to the incidence of autism among children who in worryingly high numbers in recent years have presented with gender dysphoria. These responsible professionals warn about the hijacking of the political and medical establishments by the kind of trans activism that is on display in this report. I ask your support for my two amendments which identify what is appropriate to ban, but by removing the gender ideology and upholding the legitimate rights of parents, educators and all those professionals who insist on an evidence base for their interventions, seeks to return this report to doing something good and away from doing something very harmful. I will support the well-meaning EPP amendment, which, however, merely takes the report from being even worse back to being still desperately bad. The most notable feature of this report is that there isn't a single proposed amendment from what might be called the left or the extreme left. And that's because this report and draft resolution couldn't be more radical. It is a trans activist charter. And for a lesson in cynicism, compare the title of the report with the content of the draft resolution. Because, friends, if this was about the abuse of gay people and vulnerable young gay people in particular in order to change their sexual orientation, there would be nothing to oppose. But we see how little the report actually cares about gay people when it leverages people's antipathy to conversion therapy commonly understood to advance instead a radical, or perhaps in addition, a radical gender affirmation agenda that is so harmful to children. And finally, a geopolitical point. This report will be derided and hopefully ignored by the sensible people, the adults in the room, especially parents, across Europe and elsewhere. But sadly, it will enthuse and embolden Europe's opponents, West and East, who will see in this latest chaotic and crackpot interpretation of human rights proof of our incoherence and inadequacy. Friends, you can support a ban on conversion therapy today, but do so incorporating the credible amendments that have been tabled by myself and others here, which seek to distinguish what is good and necessary from what is bad and toxic.
Alors, Monsieur Brabander, vous avez levé le carton bleu, ce qui veut dire que vous avez la parole pour 30 secondes et que cette parole, elle s'adresse à Monsieur Mullen, pour être extrêmement précis, qui vient de prendre la parole et qui disposera lui-même de 30 secondes pour vous répondre. Vous avez la parole.
Mr. Mullen, I do want to take the chance to congratulate you on your courage to go against the flow, and I hope when it comes to the voting, there's many more people of the silent majority who will follow you. Thank you.
Donc, Monsieur Mullen, est-ce que vous voulez reprendre la parole pour 30 secondes?
Just very briefly, to acknowledge the sincerity of good people on all sides of this debate. But we often say at home in Ireland, it's never too late to do the right thing. People who want this report but amended have the option to do that today. And let nobody be in fear of being accused of homophobic because they try and put this report right through the amendments. Thank you.
La parole dans le débat est à Monsieur Marcus Wichel.
Dear colleagues, at first glance, it might appear as if this resolution advanced human rights by condemning genuine abuses. In reality, its sweeping and ambiguous language poses a serious threat to evidence-based care, especially for vulnerable young people. The text conflates undeniable wrongs, coercion, force, or physical harm with legitimate consensual practices. Thoughtful exploratory talk therapy, empathetic listening to a child's feeling, or parents offering loving, age-appropriate guidance to a confused or distressed son or daughter. Critically, vague terms like prohibiting anything that might repress or suppress gender identity could criminalize honest, supportive, professional conversations. Therapists might fear prosecution simply for helping a questioning child carefully examine their emotions without rushing to affirm one path. Look at Malta. The often cited gold standard ban since its introduction. It has led to real prosecutions. Individuals facing criminal charges, fines, or even prison threats simply for sharing their personal life stories or faith-based perspectives in interviews. This is not protecting people, it's shilling free expression and open dialogue. We all condemn real abuse. Coercion or harm is already illegal and must remain so. But this resolution mandates one rigid approach, immediate unquestioning affirmation, while silencing cautious evidence-informed alternatives. It dismisses these well-documented realities and ignores mounting international concerns about rushed pathways for youth. Colleagues, let's protect long-term well-being, preserve parents' vital role, and safeguard professionals' freedom to provide thoughtful, individualized support. Reject this overly broad resolution, demand targeted, balanced measures that address true harm without unintended damage. I urge you all to vote no. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Valérie Piller-Carrard.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers et chers collègues, je tiens tout d'abord à remercier notre collègue Kate Osborne pour le rigoureux travail qu'elle a accompli dans le cadre de ce rapport. Les pratiques de conversion, également appelées thérapie de conversion ou thérapie dite réparatrice, désignent l'ensemble des mesures visant à modifier, réprimer ou supprimer l'orientation sexuelle, l'identité de genre ou l'expression de genre d'une personne. Elle repose sur une prémisse fausse et dangereuse, l'idée que certaines identités ou orientations seraient anormales et devraient être corrigées. En 2026, il est profondément préoccupant de constater que ces pratiques continuent d'être défendues. Se reconnaître dans une orientation sexuelle ou une identité de genre différente du sexe assigné à la naissance ne constitue ni une maladie ni un trouble psychique. Il ne s'agit pas d'un état pathologique et il n'existe par conséquent rien à guérir. Il est essentiel de nommer clairement la réalité de ces pratiques. Derrière un vocabulaire parfois euphémisant se cachent des méthodes coercitives et violentes. Consultations psychologiques orientées, rituels religieux, méthodes d'aversion, pression psychologique, violence verbale, physique ou sexuelle, administration forcée de médicaments, voire encore choc électrique. Ces pratiques ont un objectif unique, contraindre les personnes concernées à se conformer à une norme imposée. Contrairement à ce que prétendent leurs défenseurs, les effets de ces pratiques sont bien documentés. De nombreux experts et de nombreux psychothérapeutes, s'appuyant sur de nombreuses études scientifiques, soulignent leur caractère profondément traumatisant. Elles génèrent culpabilité, détresse psychique et perte d'estime de soi. Les jeunes sont particulièrement exposés, soumis à l'affluence de pseudo-thérapeutes ou de guérisseurs autoproclamés. Certains développent des troubles psychiques graves, pouvant mener à la dépression ou au suicide. Il est de notre responsabilité de protéger les individus contre des pratiques fondamentalement contraires aux droits humains et à l'éthique médicale. L'homosexualité et la diversité des identités de genre ne sont pas des maladies, ne sont pas des déviations. Elles ne doivent pas être ni corrigées ni réprimées. Au contraire, nous devons plutôt lutter contre toute forme de discrimination et protéger les droits des personnes LGBTI. Nous devons aujourd'hui poser un cadre clair et sans ambiguïté. Les pratiques de conversion doivent être interdites et faire l'objet de sanctions pénales effectives.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Ton Willemsen-Troen.
Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, in Europe, children and young people are still subjected to conversion practices aimed at changing or suppressing sexual orientation or gender identity. These practices are coercive and intimidating. They rely on shame, pressure, and control, and cause real and lasting harm, with research published in The Lancet showing strong links to depression, post-traumatic stress, and suicidal thoughts and attempts. Conversion practices are based on the idea that sexual orientation or gender identity must be corrected. That idea is wrong, and the harm that follows is well documented. The distinction is clear. Conversion practices are defined by their intent to change or suppress identity. Supportive healthcare respects individual autonomy and does not seek to alter who a person is. This ban is not about restricting care or counseling, but about stopping harmful practices. Evidence from across Europe shows that trans people are disproportionately targeted by conversion practices, which are often more coercive and intrusive. An increasing number of countries have already chosen to ban these harmful practices, my country, Norway, included, not to limit freedom, but to prevent harm, especially to children. I want to thank EPP Pride for their important work in keeping this issue visible. Colleagues, our responsibility is clear. We are here to protect human rights, including the right to private life, to physical and mental integrity, and to be free from degrading treatment. Protecting human rights means drawing clear lines. Banning conversion practices is one of them. I would like to commend and thank Kate Osborne for her important work. And on an ending note, I would like to say, I'm a Christian. I'm a conservative. I defend family rights and values. But I'm extremely proud today to be part of a parliamentary assembly that votes in favor of banning conversion practices. Thank you.
La parole est à Monsieur Michael Rubestad.
Mr. President, the draft resolution we are discussing today has serious weaknesses, especially because of its very broad definition of conversion practices. The term is used to cover almost any action related to sexual orientation or gender identity. This risks blurring the line between coercion and support, between abuse and conversation, and between violence and professional guidance. The resolution does not answer a key question. How are legitimate, non-coercive therapy, parental guidance, and professional judgment protected? Without a clear safe harbor, therapists, teachers, social workers, and parents may become afraid to speak openly because they fear sanctions. Dear colleagues, criticism of this resolution comes from many directions, including clinicians, parents, and women and gay rights organizations. They warn that gender non-confirming children are often treated as having a fixed identity, despite evidence of mental health vulnerability and later change. This makes it risky to set firm norms in an area where evidence is still contested. The language of the resolution also risks treating non-affirming but supportive conversations as prohibited. Exploratory therapy that encourages reflection may be interpreted as suppression. Mr. President, protecting children requires more than good intentions. It requires clear boundaries and respect for professional judgment. A policy that makes adults afraid to speak openly with children risks leaving children alone in their confusion. And that is not care, that is a failure. In conclusion, I share the goal of stopping real abuse, but I cannot support a resolution that blurs the line between violence and conversation, lacks legal safeguards, and turns caution and responsibility into something suspicious. For these reasons, I will vote against the resolution in its current form. Thank you for your attention.
La parole est à Madame Kat Ekless.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, today I speak firmly in favour of a comprehensive ban on conversion practices, and I'd like to thank my dear colleague Kate Osborne for her dedication and work as a rapporteur on this vital report. Conversion practices, misleadingly called conversion therapy, are attempts to change or suppress a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression based on the false belief that these can or should be altered. The evidence is unequivocal. These practices have no scientific basis and cause deep psychological harm. And across Europe, they continue, sometimes openly, sometimes behind closed doors, but their impact is severe, including depression, anxiety, PTSD, suicidal ideation, and with children and young people being especially vulnerable. This is not just a public health issue, it is a human rights imperative. Such practices violate rights protected under the European Convention on Human Rights and have been described by the UN experts as cruel, inhuman and degrading, and in some cases as torture. We therefore have a duty to act, and this report calls for clear, comprehensive and enforceable legislation across healthcare, education, religious settings and commercial environments, and it also stresses the need for robust victim support services, including confidential counselling, legal assistance and psychological care. I wholeheartedly support these recommendations, and I'm proud that a full ban was included in the Labour Party manifesto, and I look forward to the UK government implementing these measures, recognising that protecting LGBTQ+ people is a matter of dignity, equality and fundamental rights. We have a strong evidence-based proposal informed by countries such as Malta, who led the way, where comprehensive bans have proved effective and socially transformative. This is not about ideology. It is about protecting people from harm and affirming everyone's right to live freely without coercion as their true, authentic selves. I know some in this chamber may disagree, and that is your right, but that only reaffirms the necessity of this report. You have no right to dismiss someone's existence and truth and expose them to harm in pursuit of your ideology. I urge you all to support this report. Thank you.
La parole est à Madame Nerea Aedo.
Thank you, Chair. Bien, hablar en el año 2026, en pleno siglo XXI, de prohibir prácticas de conversión, que a mí me recuerdan actos de tortura, actos de la Inquisición, y oír algunas cosas de las que hemos oído, la verdad es que parece surrealista. Incluso se podría hacer alguna broma si no fuese un tema tan serio y que afecta a tantas personas. Prácticas de conversión que son dañinas, que están desacreditadas por organizaciones médicas, psiquiátricas, psicológicas, que pretenden un cambio en la orientación sexual o en la identidad de género de personas y que se han mostrado totalmente inútiles. Se basan en esta persona está enferma y hay que curarle, se le puede curar además, o está equivocada y le vamos a mostrar la verdad, o desde un punto de vista religioso se entiende como una situación intrínsecamente mala. Según algunos, no solo les debemos curar, les debemos cambiar y les debemos arreglar porque están estropeados. Y lo único que se consigue es daño, dolor y sufrimiento físico y psicológico que puede llegar a baja autoestima, a depresión, a aislamiento, a vergüenza, a culpa, incluso al suicidio. Porque lo que se hace con estas prácticas es algo tan terrible como negar la identidad de una persona, algo tan íntimo y tan propio. Es algo como interferir en la integridad y en la autonomía personal y es ir contra la libertad. Por otro lado, es triste, pero no podemos olvidar que la homosexualidad sigue siendo penalizada en 64 países del mundo y en 7 sigue con un castigo de pena de muerte. Y la transexualidad ya, bueno, eso es una aberración. Así que habrá que pensar que hay gente que piensa que estas pseudoterapias son con buena intención, porque les libran del castigo de la penalización de la pena de muerte. Y entiéndanme con esto la ironía, por favor. El caso es que donde no están prohibidas, vemos unas actitudes claramente homófobas, de entenderlo como comportamientos inmorales, de involución y, como se ha dicho aquí, de hablarnos de marcos ideológicos, cuando estamos hablando de cosas radicalmente diferentes. Estamos hablando de derechos y de identidad. Por otro lado, también hay que tener en consideración que es un negocio muy lucrativo, entonces a alguien le podrá interesar que esto continúe como está. En todo caso, yo agradezco el report que se acaba de presentar y creo que tenemos mucho trabajo por delante. Por un lado, en reformas legales, reformas legislativas de prohibición de las pseudoterapias de conversión y de protección a las víctimas, pero tenemos también que hacer reformas sociales que son mucho más difíciles, basadas en la educación y en la sensibilización en todos los ámbitos. Sensibilizar en tolerancia, en entender que todos somos iguales en la diferencia, en respeto a la diversidad que solo supone riqueza y en aceptar a cada persona tal y como se siente y tal y como es, porque nadie nos puede decir qué somos y nadie nos puede negar lo que somos.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Mike Reader.
Thank you, Chair. I want to remind us all today that we are debating a resolution on practices that cause real and lasting harm to people across Europe. Conversion practices have no scientific basis. They have been rejected by every major medical and psychological body. And there is clear evidence these practices are increasing depression and mental health conditions. These practices increase serious harm and suicide in our societies. These practices are torture, something this Council serves to eradicate. The report in front of us today is not speculative. It is not driven by ideology or wanting to stop loving parents and speaking to their children about their sexuality or gender, as has been suggested by some. And it's definitely not about stifling religious beliefs, as was suggested in the disgusting remarks from the member for Belgium. It is rooted in evidence. That includes evidence and testimonies from survivors that the committee heard directly from, but also includes positions of professional bodies and legal analysis drawn from across our member states. We know that almost 1 in 3 LGBT people have been offered or subjected to conversion practices, with trans people and young people being put at the greatest risks. These are real experiences and real harms. It's something this Council cannot turn a blind eye to. As my colleague has said, a ban is something the UK government has committed to, a ban that was prominent in our Labour manifesto, and a ban which each and every member of the Labour Party was voted into government to deliver. And against that backdrop today, we must be clear about the decision before us. This report has received full scrutiny at committee stage and was adopted unanimously. But now there are well-funded campaign groups bombarding council members with misinformation and threats, and I condemn those who attempt to influence the work of PACE in such an underhanded matter. Colleagues, the credibility of this Assembly depends on our ability to do serious work and then to stand by it. This report meets that test. The committee has done its work, and now the Assembly should do the same. We must support this report. Thank you.
La parole est à Monsieur José María Sánchez García.
Gracias, señor presidente. Ya se ha dicho en este debate que la coacción, al efecto de imponer una práctica de conversión o cualquier otra, es delito en todos los códigos penales de los Estados miembros del Consejo de Europa. Luego, no tiene sentido introducir un delito especial por el contenido de la práctica de que se trate si es coactiva. Esto en primer lugar. En segundo lugar, si esto es así, y me parece que nadie lo puede negar porque es la constatación de un hecho, es francamente muy difícil, por no decir imposible, prohibir cualquiera de estas prácticas llamadas de conversión si son voluntarias. Es decir, si aquel que recibe esa práctica de conversión es quien la solicita o quien la consiente cuando le es propuesta por un tercero. No tiene ningún sentido, porque no sería posible justificar esa prohibición en contra de la voluntad del interesado, porque no puede encontrarse tal justificación, toda vez que esa prohibición siempre sería contraria al artículo 8 de la Convención Europea de Derechos Humanos, que se invoca indebidamente por el proyecto de resolución, que es el derecho del respeto a la vida privada y, en definitiva, a la autonomía de la persona. ¿Me pueden ustedes explicar cómo se va a negar ese derecho a quien voluntariamente, siendo mayor de edad, desee someterse a una práctica de esta naturaleza? Si ustedes me lo explican, yo aquí no he oído todavía ni una palabra. Y no he oído ninguna palabra porque este razonamiento que ustedes despliegan en este informe, que es un informe woke e ideológico, aunque ustedes pretendan convencernos de lo contrario, es un informe que conduce a una aporía, es decir, a algo irracional. ¿Utilizan ustedes el argumento del suicidio? Pues también nos lleva a una aporía, porque todos los que defienden este informe son los que afirman constantemente que el suicidio es legítimo en la medida en que es expresión de la autodeterminación de la persona y que ante el suicidio cede y se abate la obligación del Estado en la protección de la integridad física y salud de los ciudadanos. Pues si esto es así, díganme ustedes cómo esto puede ser coherente con la prohibición de una práctica invocando el riesgo del suicidio, si es algo legítimo. Otra aporía. Por último, y concluyo, todo lo que se dice en ese texto no tiene ningún fundamento científico, salvo la afirmación sin autoridad de Madame le rapporteur. Se dice que se invoca la ciencia. Usted sabe perfectamente, igual que yo, que hay muchos científicos, tanto médicos como psicólogos, que no comparten.
La parole est à Madame Sandra Rigol pour la...
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et merci, Kate Osborne, pour ce travail essentiel qui nous permet de rappeler l'essentiel et qui nous permet surtout d'entendre absolument n'importe quoi. Viol correctif, manipulation mentale, coups et blessures, enseignement de la haine de soi, qui demande volontairement à subir ça? Dans quel monde vous vivez? Aucune personne, adulte, enfant, ne demande jamais à se faire violer, et entendre des propos aussi immondes dans cet hémicycle me révulse. Parce que oui, c'est ce que toutes les enquêtes disent, qu'il se passe dans ces soi-disant thérapies qui ne sont que des conversions. Ça n'a rien d'une thérapie. La torture n'est jamais une thérapie. La torture est une abomination. Nous la condamnons. Tous les pays la condamnent. Alors non, il n'y a pas de confusion possible avec une thérapie qui est un acte d'écoute, une tentative de dialogue, de réparation. La thérapie, c'est écouter l'autre. La torture, c'est aplatir et nier l'autre. Et c'est exactement ce que sont ces thérapies de conversion. J'ai entendu opposer les droits des adultes aux droits des enfants. Comme si encore, dans un hémicycle politique, on pouvait décider que des adultes disposent du corps des enfants. Est-ce que vous comprenez ce que vos mots veulent dire, quelles portes ils ouvrent et ce qu'ils permettent à certaines personnes de faire à des corps d'enfants? Ce sont ça, vos propos. Et c'est une insulte aux droits fondamentaux de toutes les personnes LGBT, de tous les jeunes, de tous les enfants, et une porte ouverte vers une société totalitaire. Aucune démocratie, aucune personne qui se dit être démocrate ne pourrait tolérer le moindre de ces mots. Alors on ne le répétera jamais assez, il n'y a rien à guérir quand on est gay, quand on est bi, quand on est lesbienne, quand on est trans. Il n'y a rien à guérir quand on aime une personne du même sexe. Il n'y a rien à guérir quand on est dans un corps qui ne correspond pas à qui on est et que l'on fait le choix d'être enfin soi-même. Il n'y a absolument rien à guérir. En revanche, il y a tout à aimer, il y a tout à partager et il y a toute la fierté à avoir quand on soutient ces personnes. Il n'y a rien à guérir, il y a tout à aimer et c'est pour ça que les écologistes ont toujours se sont toujours battus contre ces thérapies et ont fait passer un amendement en 2018 qui les condamne au Parlement européen et pourtant on est encore ici aujourd'hui. On est encore ici parce qu'il y a des réseaux disposant de milliards qui inondent les réseaux sociaux, qui abreuvent des partis politiques et qui diffusent de la manipulation, qui font que des enfants à travers le monde se détestent, qui font que les droits des femmes, on doit toujours se battre pour les maintenir. Et vous gagnez parfois quelques petites victoires. Vous gagnez parfois un tout petit truc, mais à la fin, l'amour gagne toujours la guerre. Il l'a gagné hier, ce texte en est l'héritier. Et les enfants d'aujourd'hui, ils seront les héritiers de ce texte. Et demain, vos idées, ils les bouteront en dehors des imaginaires. Et ils mettront cet amour au cœur de la société qu'on veut transformer.
La parole est à Martina Kempf.
Herr Präsident, die Interessenserklärung für dieses Jahr gebe ich noch ab. Liebe Kollegen, natürlich befürwortet niemand von uns eine Therapie mit Gewaltbehandlung, um geschlechtliche Orientierung zu ändern. Darüber sind wir uns alle einig. Aber diesen Therapien gleichgestellt wird im ersten Satz der Resolution Folgendes: Jedes Mittel oder jede Anstrengung, die beabsichtigt, eine Genderidentität zu ändern. Also jedes gesprochene Wort fällt darunter, das nicht eine Bestätigung ist. Wenn also in einem Kind oder Jugendlichen die Idee geweckt wurde, im falschen Körper zu stellen, so darf es nach dieser Resolution nur eine Bestätigung dieser Meinung des Kindes geben. Wer einem anderen auch nur einen gut gemeinten Ratschlag gibt, egal ob als Lehrer, kirchlicher Jugendleiter oder kirchlicher Seelsorger im Gebet, alle müssen nach dieser Resolution mit hohen Bußgeldern, wie auf Malta etwa mit bis zu 150.000 € rechnen, oder mit Freiheitsstrafen, wie man in Spanien schon erwogen hat. Nun ist es so, dass die Resolution auch deswegen zu weitgehend ist, da sie auch Pädophile und Exhibitionisten von einer Therapie ausschließt, und zwar anders als im Gesetz in Deutschland. Liebe Kollegen der bürgerlichen Parteien, ich verstehe, dass Sie zögern, den Entwurf abzulehnen, denn Sie wollen nicht als homophob kritisiert werden. Doch mit Homophobie hat die Ablehnung des Entwurfs überhaupt nichts zu tun. Nein, sogar mehrere Organisationen, die sich für die Rechte von Lesben und Schwulen einsetzen, warnen eindringlich davor, dass dieser Entwurf angenommen wird. Es geht diesen Menschen nämlich auch darum, die Rechte von Kindern zu schützen, vor allem vor Medikamenteneinnahme, die zu nicht umkehrbaren Stimmveränderungen führen kann und dazu, dass sie keine Kinder mehr gebären oder zeugen können. Wenn man nun einem jungen Erwachsenen von einer Geschlechtsumwandlungsoperation, zum Beispiel in einem Brief, abrät, dann wäre das nach der Resolution schon eine strafbare Handlung. Und schließlich enthält der Entwurf auch sogar diktatorische Elemente. Es soll eine Beschwerdestelle eingerichtet werden für Denunziation für Schüler. Schüler sollen also andere, vor allem ihre Lehrer, denunzieren. Genauso etwas gab es auch schon in der sozialistischen, sogenannten Deutschen Demokratischen Republik. Also auch Sie, liebe liberale Demokraten der Alte, bitte denken Sie daran, dass der Entwurf auch die Berufsfreiheit von Lehrern beschneidet, ja sogar von Pfarrern, die ihre Religionsfreiheit wahrnehmen wollen und die göttliche Absicht und Ordnung darstellen wollen. Auch sie können sich alle strafbar machen, nur weil sie die momentane Selbsteinstufung eines Kindes oder Jugendlichen nicht bestärken wollen. Religionsgemeinschaften werden so eingeschüchtert und sie sollen mit Organisationen der Transideologie zusammenarbeiten und dieser Ideologie entsprechendes Training erhalten. Daher sehen Sie auch die 150.000 Unterschriften in einer Online-Petition und die vielen besorgten Telefon.
Merci. Et je donne la parole à notre dernière oratrice qui clôturera le débat, Madame Naomi Kashia. Vous avez la parole.
Chair, the very notion that someone needs to be cured or fixed because of who they are is vile. It should make all of us angry. I come from Malta. small island Malta, very Catholic Malta. And yet, 10 years ago, we became the first country in Europe to prohibit conversion practices. As former Commissioner Dalli said, not because it was the easy thing to do, but because it was the right thing to do. And yes, we are very proud to be the gold standard. Thank you very much. We did it because we listened to professionals, to families, and above all, to those who had lived through these practices. People who are told that their love was wrong, that their identity was a problem, that acceptance was conditional. And let us be absolutely clear, these practices go far beyond any honest or ethical understanding of therapy or legitimate psychological support. They are not treatment, they are not care, they are abuse disguised as concern. There is absolutely nothing to defend, accept or justify about conversion practices, especially for Council of Europe member states that claim to be committed to the protection of human rights. So I invite you, truly, to listen to the lived experiences, listen to the survivors, listen to the fear, the isolation, the lasting trauma. They speak of shame, they speak of degradation, of humiliation, of feeling utterly worthless. And this goes beyond ideology, yes. This is not a woke report. This is about protecting vulnerable young people. And even where there is disagreement on an ideological level, then at the very least, look at the science. There is absolutely no scientific basis for these practices, none. They are ineffective, they only harm, they are a scam, they are fraudulent, they are profoundly harmful, and they need to stop. In Malta, we recognize that a society which has come so far in embracing diversity has no place for practices that are so diametrically opposed to its values. And so, colleagues, now it is up to us. What is the message that this Assembly wants to send? Are we saying that it is acceptable to subject vulnerable young people to practices that deny their very existence? Or are we going to step up as a human rights assembly and say clearly and without hesitation that these harmful practices have no place in our societies? Because if this assembly cannot speak up to protect children from practices that teach them to hate themselves, then we must ask who our human rights framework is for. So thank you, Kate, for your very important work. Europe must be a place where young people hear just one resounding message. You are not broken, you do not need fixing, and it is more than okay to be who you are. Thank you very much.
Merci. Il nous faut maintenant interrompre l'audition des orateurs. Oui,
Mr. President, as per our Rule 37.1.d, I am moving forward a motion to have the report referred back to the committee. This debate shown very clearly that among many disgraceful and shameful resolutions in the history of this Assembly, this is perhaps the most shameful because it intends to punish parents that want to help their children. And I urge the colleagues from the EDP, the left is already lost. But Pablo, por favor, no voten a favor de esta estúpida resolución. Por favor.
De ce que vous avez demandé en intervenant, donc on a bien pris note. Donc, Monsieur Jablonski, vous demandez un renvoi du rapport en commission. S'agissant d'une motion de procédure, seuls peuvent être entendus l'auteur de la motion, un orateur contre, et le rapporteur ou le président de la commission intéressée. Est-ce que quelqu'un demande maintenant la parole contre la motion? L'avis de la commission? Oui. Monsieur, vous avez la parole.
Chair, I would like to speak against the motion for one particular reason. The reason brought forward is false. So there is no reason why to accept that motion. Thank you very much.
Merci. L'avis de la Commission ?
Monsieur le Président, merci. Non, la Commission veut maintenir ce texte aujourd'hui en plénière. Le texte est prêt, il est équilibré, malgré tous vos propos. Donc nous maintenons le texte en plénière aujourd'hui.
L'Assemblée va maintenant se prononcer à la majorité simple sur la proposition de renvoi aux commissions. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat. La motion n'est pas adoptée. La motion est rejetée. Nous continuons l'examen du rapport. Et donc j'en étais à expliquer que maintenant les orateurs inscrits qui, présents pendant le débat, n'ont pu s'exprimer, peuvent transmettre dans les 4 heures leur intervention dactylographiée au service de la séance pour publication au compte-rendu. Ce texte ne doit pas dépasser 400 mots et doit être transmis par voie électronique. J'appelle maintenant la réplique de la Commission. Madame la rapporteure Osborne, vous avez la parole pour 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you everyone for your contributions. Well, maybe not quite everyone. Particularly like to thank Dr. Helena Darley. I know she had to leave. So at the Assembly, whilst resolutions are not legally binding, they carry significant political weight as they are based on broad consensus around standards. This report sets out a framework that can be applied across different, This report sets out a framework that can be applied across different legal traditions and jurisdictions because we are not all starting from the same place. Some countries have already acted, 10 of them, and the Netherlands and the UK joining them soon. Some are exploring legislation. Some are stuck. But many face opposition that is organised, well-funded and determined. Colleagues, conversion practices are not therapy. They are acts deliberately designed and intended to suppress, shame or erase a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. The harm is documented, the trauma is real, the outcome predetermined. We are seeing across Europe a pushback on our rights, and we see it here today. We are seeing the anti-gender movement attack women's rights, and we are seeing those same players pour money into attacks on all our rights. These attacks are a deliberate attempt to misrepresent what a ban on conversion practices is and the conflation of gender and sexual orientation. Of course, we are not trying to criminalise parents or teachers who want to have an honest, good and open conversation with children. Those who seek to spread misinformation and divide us do so for a very simple reason. They want to create fear, to delay action and have loopholes and harm our fight for equality. A ban does not interfere with ethical, exploratory support, but it will stop coercion dressed up as care. Member States now have a framework to bring forward comprehensive legal measures, not vague statements, not partial bans with loopholes, a full ban. A full ban that means that there will be consequences for those who profit from this abuse or who hide behind institutional power to carry it out. I'm not ashamed those opposing it those opposing this should be ashamed. I am not, I am proud. Passing this report matters. Conversion practices are harmful. They have no place in Europe or indeed anywhere, and they must be banned. Thank you.
Madame la présidente de la commission, désire-t-elle répondre? Oui.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Notre débat nous rappelle que la lutte pour rendre banale l'homosexualité ou la transidentité n'est pas terminée. En effet, si certains croient pouvoir convertir ces personnes, c'est bien qu'ils les considèrent soit anormales, soit marginales. Je ne peux que remercier Madame Osborne pour avoir préparé un texte complet et très équilibré que notre commission a approuvé à l'unanimité. Les États membres du Conseil de l'Europe doivent interdire les pratiques de conversion et sanctionner ceux qui les promeuvent ou les réalisent. Les victimes doivent être accompagnées et protégées, les familles sensibilisées et une attention particulière doit être portée à la protection des enfants. Faut-il encore le rappeler, ces pratiques n'ont aucun fondement scientifique et reposent sur des croyances ou des préjugés. Elles sont assimilables dans les cas les plus graves à des actes de torture ou des traitements inhumains et dégradants. Si j'espère que les personnes LGBTI ne sont plus soumises aujourd'hui à des trépanations ou des électrochocs, il est révulsant de penser qu'elles continuent à subir des chastetés forcées, à des relations hétérosexuelles forcées, assimilables à des viols, des privations de nourriture, des insultes ou des menaces, quand ce ne sont pas des mariages forcés, des expulsions du domicile parental ou encore des crimes au nom du soi-disant honneur. Comment peut-on prétendre ramener une personne dans une soi-disant bonne voie et assumer être l'auteur de ces sévices? Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, tous les efforts doivent être entrepris pour garantir aux personnes LGBTI les mêmes droits que tout autre, sans discrimination. Mais surtout, mettre fin à ces pratiques, c'est se battre pour la dignité humaine de tous dans nos sociétés. Nous ne saurions cautionner de tels actes barbares. L'interdiction de ces pratiques est indispensable et la nécessité d'avancer vers un cadre législatif dédié est indiscutable. Les valeurs de notre Assemblée et de nos traités, au premier rang desquels la Convention européenne des droits de l'homme, sont des premiers fondements pour lutter contre ces pratiques insidieuses. Chers collègues, dans une époque de recul des libertés individuelles, je vous appelle à soutenir de manière forte et compacte ce texte. Il s'agit d'une résolution nécessaire et urgente et d'une étape importante dans notre combat pour renforcer et consolider l'égalité de toutes et tous en Europe. Enfin, si la tendance internationale et européenne semble avancer vers l'interdiction et la lutte contre ces pratiques depuis l'exemple de Malte en 2016, seule une minorité de pays européens a pris des dispositions législatives contre ces pratiques. Je porte l'espoir que l'initiative citoyenne visant à l'interdiction de ces pratiques dans l'Union européenne, soumise auprès de la Commission européenne le 17 novembre 2025, trouve une issue favorable pour finalement emporter l'adhésion de l'ensemble des États membres de notre organisation. Justifier ces pratiques de conversion, c'est légitimer la torture physique et psychologique. Je vous remercie.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Ce qui clôt la discussion générale. La Commission sur l'égalité et la non-discrimination a présenté un projet de résolution sur lequel 10 amendements ont été déposés. J'ai été informé que la présidente de la Commission sur l'égalité et la non-discrimination souhaitait proposer à l'Assemblée de considérer les amendements 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 et 3 au projet de résolution qui ont été rejetés par la Commission à une majorité de 2/3 des suffrages exprimés comme rejetés par l'Assemblée. Est-ce bien le cas, Madame la Présidente? Merci. Si personne ne s'y oppose, je considère ces amendements comme rejetés définitivement. S'il y a une objection, nous devrons vérifier qu'elle a le soutien requis de 10 personnes. Y a-t-il une objection? Étant donné que vous êtes plus de 10 représentants ou suppléants qui s'y opposent, la demande de la présidente de la Commission est rejetée. Ces amendements seront donc discutés selon les modalités habituelles. Ils seront appelés dans l'ordre dans lequel ils s'appliquent au texte, tel que publié dans le recueil des amendements. Je vous rappelle que le temps d'intervention pour chaque amendement est limité à 30 secondes. Amendement numéro 1. La parole est à Monsieur Ronan Mullen pour soutenir l'amendement numéro 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. Everything that has been proposed as bad and that we've been reminded of, that is conversion, therapy or conversion practices is clearly identified as being such in this Amendment 1. But what this Amendment 1 makes sure is that the good faith exercise of parental rights to educate, etc., and evidence-based gender care, including where that is gender care which doesn't seek to push children down the path of gender transition, but rather is non-affirming, though certainly non-coercive. And I think every reasonable parent or somebody who has children's welfare at heart will see that that is what this amendment seeks.
Quelqu'un demande-t-il la parole contre cet amendement? Vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. President. Believe me, as an openly gay man, I can tell you that there is nothing to cure about who you love and who you want to be. And let me say to the member from Ireland that doing something in good faith, trying to convert somebody's gender identity or sexuality, does not make it right. I think we should reject this amendment because it seeks to remove the fundamental basis of this report and, crucially, would introduce loopholes that would allow these vile conversion practices to continue.
La Commission a rejeté cet amendement à la majorité de 2 tiers. Nous allons procéder au vote sur l'amendement. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat. L'amendement est donc rejeté. La parole est à Monsieur Bob de Brabander pour l'amendement numéro 4.
This amendment aims to remove ideologically contested and medically undefined concepts from the scope of the resolution and confines it to sexual orientation where a clear scientific and legal consensus exists.
Qui souhaite parler contre cet amendement? Vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. President. We should reject this amendment because, again, it changes the basis of the report and it seeks to limit what we would mean as an assembly by the definition of conversion practices in order that some of the abusive practices can continue. I urge the Assembly to reject this amendment.
La Commission a rejeté cet amendement à la majorité de 2 tiers. Nous allons procéder au vote. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande affichage. L'amendement n'est pas accepté. Dans l'amendement 5, la parole est à Monsieur Bob de Brabander.
With this amendment, we want to safeguard freedom of expression, scientific inquiry, and evidence-based care, particularly for vulnerable children and adolescents.
Qui souhaite parler contre cet amendement? Vous avez la parole.
Mr. President, we've already heard throughout the debate from people much more eloquent than me that science is crystal clear on this. These conversion practices are harmful. They are harmful to people that this Assembly was created to stand up for. This leaves the door wide open if this amendment is carried, so I therefore urge the Assembly to reject this amendment.
La Commission a rejeté cet amendement à la majorité de 2 tiers. Nous allons procéder au vote sur l'amendement. Le scrutin est Le scrutin est clos et je demande l'affichage du résultat. L'amendement n'est pas adopté. Nous allons examiner maintenant l'amendement 2. La parole est à Monsieur Georgios Stamatis et je signale qu'il y a également un amendement oral. Donc...
Thank you, Mr. President. As I mentioned before in my speech, the APP political group supports fully
this draft resolution, and with this amendment, we want to strengthen the text by highlighting the important role that parents play in the education of children, the independence of the healthcare professionals, and of course the support that the religious institution can provide to young people and everyone who need.
La présidence a été saisie par la rapporteure du sous-amendement oral suivant au nom de la Commission. Après le mot « parents », ajoutez les mots, je cite, « des institutions religieuses organisées » et l'amendement ainsi amendé se lirait, je cite, « L'Assemblée affirme qu'une interdiction des pratiques de conversion ne devrait pas limiter les interventions de soutien des parents, des institutions religieuses organisées ou des cliniciens qualifiés fournissant des services de santé aux adultes, aux jeunes et ou aux enfants, ni limiter l'indépendance de ces interventions tant que les interventions ne cherchent pas à changer, réprimer des personnes. En application de l'article 34.7a du règlement, le président peut, à titre exceptionnel, déclarer recevable un amendement oral ou un sous-amendement oral s'il estime qu'il est destiné à apporter une clarification, à tenir compte de faits nouveaux ou à permettre une conciliation. Je considère ce sous-amendement oral comme recevable au regard des critères du règlement. Il ne peut toutefois être pris en compte si 10 représentants ou suppléants au moins s'y opposent et se lèvent. Y a-t-il des objections à la prise en compte de ce sous-amendement oral? Il n'y a pas d'objection. Nous allons donc examiner ce sous-amendement oral. La parole est à la rapporteure pour soutenir le sous-amendement oral au nom de la Commission.
Yes, I accept this amendment, as does the committee.
Quelqu'un demande-t-il la parole contre ce sous-amendement oral? Personne. La Commission y est favorable. Ah oui, pardon, j'ai sauté. Oui. Quel est l'avis de l'auteur de l'amendement? Monsieur Stamatis, je ne le vois pas. Monsieur Stamatis, quel est votre avis sur cet amendement?
Yes.
Ok, vous êtes donc... La Commission est favorable. Nous allons donc procéder au vote de ce sous-amendement oral et le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat. Et le sous-amendement est donc adopté. Nous en venons maintenant à l'amendement numéro 2. Quelqu'un demande-t-il la parole contre l'amendement ainsi sous-amendé? Oui, vous avez la parole.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, we will actually vote in favour of this amendment, although unfortunately it changes nothing, because while it's a rotten compromise between the left and the EPP, pretending to be right, we have very dangerous wording in the end of it, because all these actions are not prosecuted so long as they do not attempt to change people. Well, what is the reason? If parents want to help their children, they do indeed want to change them, and for a very good reason. They should be rewarded and supported, not prosecuted. We're supported, but unfortunately, the resolution is still terrible.
Quel est l'avis de la Commission?
La Commission est en faveur de l'amendement sous-amendé.
Nous allons procéder au vote sur l'amendement ainsi sous-amendé. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat. L'amendement ainsi sous-amendé est adopté. Amendement numéro 6. La parole est à Monsieur Bob de Brabander.
This amendment is one of the most important. It aims to restore legal certainty and prevents the resolution from functioning as an instrument of ideological enforcement against families and professionals. So if you are not in favor of a dictatorship, you should support this amendment.
Qui souhaite parler contre cet amendement? Vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is nothing to do with supporting a dictatorship. This is about the definition in the text that we include. I said earlier in the debate, the words good faith are far too broad and leave open a loophole if we support this motion. And take it from me as a proud gay man that the words good faith are often used for people who carry out these vile practices in their name against young people. We should reject this amendment.
La Commission a rejeté cet amendement à la majorité de 2 tiers. Nous allons procéder au vote sur l'amendement. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat. L'amendement n'est pas adopté. Amendement numéro 7, la parole est à Monsieur Bob de Brabander.
Well, once again, criminal sanctions are inappropriate for regulating therapeutic, educational, or parental conduct in the absence of coercion or abuse. This amendment aims to remove the risk of criminalizing care, caution, or disagreement. So I urge everybody, please support this.
Quelqu'un demande-t-il la parole contre l'amendement? Vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. President. If we accept this amendment, we will considerably weaken the brilliant report that's been put together by Kate Osborne, my colleague and friend in the wider committee. And crucially, if we accept this amendment, we would continue to allow people making money around Europe from this vile abuse. I urge you to reject this amendment.
La Commission a rejeté cet amendement à la majorité de 2 tiers. Nous allons procéder au vote sur l'amendement. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat. L'amendement n'est pas adopté. Amendement numéro 8. La parole est à Monsieur Powell Jablonski.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, this is a basic fact. If a 13-year-old boy comes to the parents and says that he feels that he's a girl, he doesn't become magically a girl. And if his parents want to help him, they shouldn't be prosecuted. You know who should be prosecuted? Those that try to administer life-changing drugs, so-called puberty blockers, to these children. And this is a test, not for the left. As I said again, the left is already lost. But the EPP, please, if you really want to protect the children, you should vote in favor of this amendment to prosecute people who are harming them.
Quelqu'un demande-t-il la parole contre cet amendement? Oui, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. President. We heard earlier in the debate that this was an ideological debate. This amendment is an ideological amendment. It seeks to introduce totally irrelevant contents to the report and, crucially, to add restrictions on what can be classified as conversion practices. I urge you to reject this amendment.
La Commission a rejeté cet amendement à la majorité de 2 tiers. Nous allons procéder au vote sur l'amendement. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat. L'amendement n'est pas adopté. La parole est à Monsieur Jablonski pour soutenir l'amendement numéro 9.
Dear colleagues, you say that you are against conversion. So here is a chance for you to prove it. This amendment intends to have criminal consequences, criminal sanctions for people who actually are trying to convert children to implement life-changing surgical procedures upon them. They are still confused. They still do not realize what consequences will it have for their entire lives. This is perhaps the most far-reaching amendment, but it's also the most important. So please, protect our children.
souhaite s'exprimer contre cet amendement? Non, vous n'avez pas le droit.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would reject this amendment and urge the Assembly to reject this amendment. It once again seeks to add restrictions on what we would define as conversion practices, and it totally changes the fundamentals of the report. It's clearly beyond the scope of the report. Therefore, you should reject this amendment.
La Commission a rejeté cet amendement à la majorité des 2/3. Nous allons procéder au vote de l'amendement. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat et l'amendement n'est pas adopté. La parole est à Monsieur Jablonski pour soutenir l'amendement 10.
This amendment is equally important because young children that do not still realize who they are, what they feel, often fall prey to predators from radical left-wing organizations that intend to coerce them into sex-changing operation. This should be banned, and all this online harmful content that harms our children should also be prosecuted, not parents who try to help them. So please vote in favor of this amendment.
Quelqu'un demande-t-il la parole contre l'amendement? Vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is well beyond the scope of the report, and let me just address a point that was made earlier by our colleagues who are sat across the Assembly. They said it was unchristian to try and ban conversion practices. Let me quote to you Romans in the Bible, chapter 13, verse 10, that said, "Love does no harm to a neighbour, therefore love is the fulfilment of the law." How dare you make an allegation that it's unchristian to stand up for human rights and for people's sexuality and people's gender? That's precisely what this Council of Europe was founding on, and that's precisely what we should be standing up for in this chamber. I urge you to reject this amendment.
La Commission a rejeté cet amendement à la majorité de 2/3. Nous allons procéder au vote sur l'amendement. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat et l'amendement n'est pas adopté. La parole est à Monsieur Ronan Mullen pour soutenir l'amendement numéro 3.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I find it surprising that only one person has defended or opposed each of these amendments. It does reinforce me in the belief that a small number of activists are driving this, being enabled really by a much larger group who do not choose to speak. The sole consolation I have is that the idea we will be pushing at home is that now people, parents and professionals can work with their children, and in trying to change them from gender dysphoria, they are of course not trying to change them as people. This amendment, it's clear what it does. It honours the principle that there are bad things which we should oppose, but it carves out what it is important to protect. Thank you.
Qui souhaite parler contre cet amendement? Monsieur Penn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Mr. Mullen, but I might be the only person speaking. But believe you me, I speak for millions of people across this continent who want to see this vile practice thrown out. I finish by saying this, Mr. President. This Council of Europe was founded to stand up for human rights back in the 1940s, and it led the way on issues before, like the death penalty, like standing up for minorities. This is the next important chapter for this Council of Europe. I urge you to reject this amendment and reject the vile ideology that we've heard in this chamber today.
La Commission a rejeté cet amendement à la majorité de 2/3. Nous allons procéder au vote sur l'amendement. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos. Je demande l'affichage du résultat. L'amendement n'est pas adopté. Et donc, nous allons procéder au vote sur le projet de résolution contenu dans le document 163-15, ainsi amendé. Le scrutin est ouvert. Le scrutin est clos et je demande l'affichage du résultat. La proposition de résolution contenue dans le document 163-15 ainsi amendé est adoptée.
Good afternoon, my friends. We move on to the next item on the agenda. The next item of business this afternoon is a debate under urgent procedure on the 65th anniversary of the European Social Charter, social rights as the foundation of resilient democracies and social justice. Presented by Mr. Paul Gallet, on behalf of the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. In order to finish at 19 p.m., I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 18:50 to allow time for the reply and the vote. I call Mr. Gallet, reporter. You have 7 minutes now and 3 at the end of reply to the debate. You have the floor, my friend.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, l'année 2026 marque les 65 ans de la Charte sociale européenne, 65 ans d'engagement en faveur des droits sociaux, 65 ans d'un texte qui reste une boussole pour l'Europe, une boussole pour les droits économiques et sociaux, une boussole pour la démocratie. La Charte n'est pas un traité parmi d'autres. C'est le seul instrument européen entièrement consacré à la protection des plus vulnérables. C'est une fierté et c'est surtout une responsabilité politique collective. Les droits sociaux ne sont pas secondaires, ils sont le socle de la cohésion sociale, le fondement de la confiance dans les institutions et une condition essentielle de la résilience démocratique. Ne pas respecter ces droits, c'est fragiliser nos sociétés. Les protéger, c'est renforcer la stabilité démocratique en Europe. 2026 marque aussi les 30 ans de la Charte sociale européenne révisée, le cadre juridique le plus complet dont nous disposons pour les droits sociaux et économiques. Ce cadre ne serait rien sans un garant. Ce garant, c'est le Comité européen des droits sociaux. Ce comité ne se contente pas d'interpréter la Charte, il la fait vivre. Chaque décision transforme des droits inscrits dans un texte en protection concrète pour nos citoyens. Grâce au Comité européen des droits sociaux, la justice sociale devient tangible au quotidien et je tiens en votre nom aussi de les remercier. Mais les pressions sur les droits sociaux n'ont jamais été aussi fortes qu'aujourd'hui. Pression budgétaire, pression sociale, pression administrative. C'est dans ce contexte que la conférence de haut niveau sur la charte à Chisinau en mars 2026 revêt une importance particulière. Elle sera un moment politique clé, un moment pour transformer des engagements renouvelés en actions concrètes au niveau national et parlementaire. Un moment pour envoyer un message clair. L'Europe choisit la justice sociale aujourd'hui et pour l'avenir, pour des démocraties fortes et résilientes, ou comme quelqu'un d'autre a dit, predictable and loyal. Nos projets de résolution et de recommandations s'inscrivent pleinement dans cette dynamique. Ils forment un ensemble cohérent, tourné vers l'action. Ils rappellent que ratifier la charte révisée, le protocole de Turin et en particulier le protocole sur les réclamations collectives n'est pas seulement une formalité juridique. C'est un acte politique très fort, un signal visible issu de Chisinau de confiance renouvelée dans les droits sociaux et la participation démocratique. Le mécanisme de réclamation collective est un outil très concret. Il permet à la société civile, aux partenaires sociaux de contribuer directement au système de la charte, de faire entendre la voix de celles et ceux qui en ont le plus besoin. C'est aussi un instrument intergénérationnel ouvert aux jeunes comme aux moins jeunes, un signe de maturité démocratique. Le rôle des parlements nationaux est ici très central. Nous sommes les acteurs clés de la mise en œuvre de la charte. Nous sommes ses garants et ses veilleurs. À nous de renforcer notre expertise sur la charte, d'intégrer ses obligations dans nos législations et nos évaluations d'impact, de suivre les décisions du Comité européen des droits sociaux, de réexaminer les dispositions non acceptées, les réserves, et d'initier les réformes nécessaires. C'est ainsi que les engagements pris à Chisinau deviendront des réformes concrètes dans nos pays. La recommandation complète ce travail en mettant l'accent sur des actions pratiques, notamment en invitant le Comité des ministres à lancer et soutenir des campagnes, débats et initiatives de sensibilisation autour des droits sociaux et de la Charte, mobiliser la société civile, les jeunes et les partenaires sociaux, et renforcer l'universalité de l'application de la Charte sans exception territoriale. Elle ouvre également des perspectives d'avenir à la hauteur de l'élan actuel, politique actuel, notamment en explorant une meilleure reconnaissance du droit à un environnement sain et en réfléchissant à l'évolution du champ d'application de la Charte. Chers collègues, 65 ans après son adoption, la Charte sociale européenne est plus qu'un symbole, elle reste une boussole. Et c'est pour cela que se définit aussi un peu le caractère d'urgence de ce petit débat, parce qu'il est urgent de mettre en œuvre la Charte sociale et de célébrer son anniversaire. Et aujourd'hui, nous avons une responsabilité particulière, celle de lui donner un nouvel élan politique. Je vous invite donc à soutenir ces projets de résolution et de recommandations pour la justice sociale, pour la démocratie et pour l'Europe. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gales. And in the debate, I call first Mr. Oleksiy Goncharenko from ECP Group.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, we're now speaking about social charter, and I want to take this opportunity to tell you about social humanitarian catastrophe in Ukraine. Unfortunately, right now, we have this catastrophe. And during this session, we were discussing 2 times Middle East, narrower, broader, and this very important issue. I completely agree with this. But we have something happening in a member state right now, and I'm speaking about humanitarian catastrophe. I just want you to imagine -20 Celsius, no heating, no electricity, no running water in your apartment. Just imagine this for, I don't know, for one day. How to live like this. And millions of Ukrainians are now living like this. It's absolutely crazy. And I want first to address you. You will come back to your parliaments, to your countries. Please, till this winter has not ended, please send humanitarian convoys to Ukraine. We need everything. Generators, food, fuel, warm clothes. Because next week, it will be up to -30 in Ukraine, Celsius. I can't imagine how these people, especially poor people, will live. Because those who have some money for generator, for some inventor, something, but poor people, elder people, people with small children, it's very difficult, believe me. And I'm not accusing you that you're not paying attention to this, I just ask your support. And one of the reasons why we're not speaking about this, I also understand it. Because our government and our president likes to send you signals of power, resilience, unbreakness, invincibility. Just several days ago in Davos, President Zelensky again spoke about power and everything. And it was very well received. Standing ovations, great. And then these people who were applauding in Davos, they came to their warm houses. And Ukrainians were watching this from their freezing apartments. Just like dying from these temperatures. Like having no hope, having no electricity, many of them having no jobs and everything else which war brings with it. So this signal of power is very like, you know, people like it. But I want to give you another signal from Ukraine. SOS, save our souls. We are on the edge. It's not a survival show, you know, like it was a TV reality. I understand that many got used to it. And you think, oh, tanks, oh, missiles, now drones, now hypersonic missiles, now -30. And Ukrainians are still unbreakable. We are exhausted. Please, save our souls. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koncharenko. The next speaker is Julian Bulay on behalf of ALDE Group.
Much, Mr. President, dear Rapporteur, dear colleagues, dear Alex, there's no place in criticizing your president here. We're all behind the Ukrainian people, behind your leadership to do the best for your country, and we should be solidary here. So there's no place for criticism for the greatest man in Europe defending us from the brutal Russians wanting to destroy our identity and values. So please refrain from that. We are all behind Ukraine. The European Social Charter is a unique international instrument with its comprehensive scope, legally binding commitments, collective complaints mechanism and monitoring. In 65 years, this document has developed and evolved to respond to changing social realities. The European Social Charter is a living instrument and a model for the promotion and protection of social rights globally, not only in Europe. I agree with the rapporteur when he says that social rights are under unprecedented pressure in Europe and beyond. AI tools affect the job market. In Europe, the aging population and the deindustrialization are a challenge. The gender pay gap often persists. Ethnic and racial discrimination remains a sad and appalling reality for many. The unpredictability of the foreign trade system, with some older friends using unfriendly tariff policy, is not helpful. As parliamentarians, we try to find solutions and we confront this pressure in our daily work with our citizens at home. We also feel the devastating consequences of this pressure, including when our citizens are lured by populist forces into supporting easy solutions for complex problems. And this is, I have to mention that all the conservatives criticizing so much what goes on here, pretending that they care for poor people with limited resources, they are just totally absent from this debate. And that has to be said, that they really don't care about the poorest of the poor of this continent. And we should take distance from that type of hypocrisy. We must not overlook social rights or abandon our pursuit of social justice, employment and decent working conditions today when important structural, technological, economical and social changes are reshaping the labour markets. In Europe, we have made tremendous progress in the past 65 years, and we are the most advanced group of countries on this matter. Let us not stop here. The European Social Charter is a major source of inspiration and a valuable tool in this pursuit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ulal. In the debate, I call next Mr. Berdan Öztürk from UEL.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. On behalf of my group, we strongly support the report marking the 65th anniversary of the Convention and all efforts that strengthen it. As reaffirmed in May 2023, Reykjavik Declaration, the European Social Charter is an integral part of the human rights system. Without effective social rights, full respect for human rights is impossible. And human dignity depends on social justice, equality, and solidarity. Social rights are the material foundation of democracy. When access to education, healthcare, housing, and social protection is unequal, concepts such as dignity, equality, and participation lose their real meaning. This is particularly true in countries where democratic institutions are weakening. As in this context, social rights are often the first to be undermined. Turkey provides as a clear example of this dynamic. While social rights are formally recognized, in practice, access to these rights is often determined by political views, identity, and backgrounds. These structural problems affect vulnerable groups most severely. For Kurdish communities, the lack of access to public services and education in one's mother tongue is not merely a cultural issue. It's a question of equal citizenship. Language barriers make it difficult to access healthcare, social assistance, and municipal services, pushing vulnerable groups further to the margins of public life. This exclusion is reinforced by the unlawful use of power, such as the appointment of government trustees in municipalities. Replacing elected local leaders eliminates democratic representation and breaks the connection between local governments and the communities they serve. In many Kurdish majority municipalities, elected administrations have developed inclusive social policies, such as women's centers, elderly support programs, multilingual services, and community-based welfare networks. After trustees were appointed, many of these initiatives were cancelled. Gender inequality is compounded by the loss of local support mechanisms that enable participation in social and economic life. For all older people, the centralization of services increases isolation and makes access to care more difficult. Here, the link between social justice and democracy becomes clear. When local democracy is weakened, social rights are weakened in practice. Protecting social rights, especially at the local level and for vulnerable groups, is therefore not only a matter of social policy, it is a prerequisite for democratic legitimacy, social cohesion, and long-term stability.
Thank you, Mr. Öztürk. And now I call Ms. Luz Martinez on behalf of the Socialist Group to take the floor.
Gracias, presidente. 65 años después de su adopción, la Carta Social Europea sigue siendo el pilar fundamental de los derechos sociales y económicos en nuestro continente. El reconocimiento de derechos esenciales como el trabajo digno, la vivienda, la salud, la educación y la protección social sitúan a la persona en el centro de la arquitectura normativa europea. Su versión de 1996 amplió estos derechos y reforzó la protección de los trabajadores, familias y colectivos vulnerables, consolidándola como la auténtica Constitución Social de Europa. A pesar de los avances, los derechos garantizados por la Carta sufren hoy presiones sin precedentes: desigualdades crecientes, precariedad laboral, brechas de género, exclusión habitacional y tensiones entre la economía y los derechos sociales. El Comité Europeo de Derechos Sociales señala carencias persistentes en ámbitos como el sinhogarismo, la situación de trabajadores migrantes, la discriminación en la vivienda o la falta de plena inclusión educativa. Estas conclusiones dejan claro que se debe reforzar el seguimiento de su cumplimiento y que los Estados deben adaptar sus políticas a los estándares del sistema. La Asamblea Parlamentaria ha sido siempre un actor central en la promoción y defensa de la Carta y su papel es esencial para impulsar legislaciones, presupuestos y políticas públicas. Además, la creciente conciencia de que la estabilidad democrática depende de la cohesión social otorga a la Carta un papel estratégico. Por eso, fortalecer los derechos sociales se convierte no solo en un imperativo moral, sino en un elemento esencial de seguridad democrática. Tal y como señala este informe, invertir en derechos sociales significa reducir desigualdades, impulsar la justicia social y restaurar la confianza en las instituciones. La Carta ha demostrado un impacto real. Las decisiones del Comité Europeo de Derechos Sociales han frenado desalojos forzosos, han mejorado el acceso a la vivienda social, han reforzado la protección frente al despido, especialmente en situaciones de vulnerabilidad, y han orientado políticas frente al aumento del coste de la vida, recomendando ajustar prestaciones a la inflación y elevar los salarios mínimos. Sin embargo, para consolidar estos logros es imprescindible avanzar en varios frentes, como decía el reporter. Integrar la Carta en las leyes nacionales y en las evaluaciones de impacto social, reforzar los mecanismos de cumplimiento, actualizar estándares sociales y promover la participación de la sociedad civil a través del protocolo de reclamaciones colectivas, cuya ratificación sigue pendiente en numerosos Estados. Asimismo, urge promover la ratificación de la Carta revisada y avanzar en el reconocimiento del derecho a un entorno saludable como nuevo pilar social europeo. Señorías, la Carta Social Europea sigue siendo la hoja de ruta para una Europa justa, inclusiva y democrática. Su plena implementación es clave para la cohesión social y la legitimidad de nuestras instituciones. Por ello, el compromiso debe ser claro. Más Carta, mejor Carta y un renovado liderazgo político que haga de los derechos sociales el fundamento de nuestro futuro común. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martinez. And next speaker is Albana Bokshi from EPP.
Dear Chair, colleagues, first of all, I would like to congratulate the rapporteur for bringing this report, not as symbolic as he mentioned, but because it's timely. It marks 65 years of European Social Charter, the social pillar of the Council of Europe and the indispensable counterpart of the European Convention of Human Rights. As this Assembly has long underlined, social rights are not secondary. They are essential to resilient democracies, social cohesion, and citizens' trust. At a time of demographic fragility, growing inequalities, demographic pressure, rapid labour market transformation, Charter remains one of the European strongest safeguards for dignity and fairness. Yet, the 2025 conclusion of European Committee of Social Rights sends a clear warning across Europe. Core labour, social rights are under serious strain, particularly due to digitalization, climate change, weakened social dialogue, as it's mentioned in the report. The figures are alarming. Out of 230 conclusions, only 42 of them found conformity, while 171 did not. This is not a marginal gap, but evidence of systemic and recurring failures and that demand political attention. And I'm not going to repeat what my colleague said about the other problems that the report has found, like excessive working hours, gender inequality, collective bargain, so I'm not repeating them. But I would like to highlight the committee concerning issue. Failure to report. 3 states, including my country, Albania, submitted no report at all. The committee is clear that this constitutes a breach of the Charter. This is not a technical omission, but a failure of democratic accountability. The Charter is not optional, and non-reporting undermines the credibility of the entire system. Citizens are not being heard. This is why the report matters. Social justice, decent living conditions, social cohesion are not only social objectives. They are, as it was mentioned before, pillars of democratic stability and security. That's why in this context, all states should ratify the revised charter as it's requested from the report. It should be ratified the collective complaint protocol and the Turing protocol. National parliaments have a key responsibility to integrate the charter into legislation, budget and impact assessment. National authorities, including courts and parliament, must fully take into account interpretation and finding of the European Committee. EPP Group sends a clear message: strong social rights, properly implemented and democratically overseen, are indispensable to resilient democracy, social justice and citizens' trust.
Thank you, Ms. Bakshi. I'm really sorry, colleagues. I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speaker list who have been present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. Speeches must not exceed 400 words. I remind colleagues that the typewritten text can be submitted electronically if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. Thank you. That concludes the list of speakers then, and I call Mr. Gallas, a reporter, to reply. You have 3 minutes.
Report here in the Assembly, and I hope to know what the colleagues that did not have the opportunity to speak now wanted to say. I'm very grateful for the support. Let's be realistic, because compared to the debate before, this is a nice debate. We have the impression that this is a nice debate and it's consensual. But I think we have to bear in mind that talking about the social charter is talking about a diamond. It's a treasure. We bear in our midst a treasure. And if we read the social charter, it is enormously strong. And I think it would be, it was also a discovery for me when I went into the detail of the whole social charter, of all the protocols and everything. It is enormously strong. We, as Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, part of the Council of Europe, have an enormously strong instrument. And defending the social rights means defending every single person. And defending the social rights means defending a society that wants to live together and not being separated. It means defending democracy. And I think I'm convinced of it, that the social charter will be one of the main instruments to defend our democratic pact, to defend the future of Europe. I totally understand that for some countries it might not be easy to ratify and sign everything, and I know it from my own experience. I understand that many countries try to implement it in the spirit, even if not in the words, but in the spirit. But I think that there is a lot of dynamics. That's why I saw in the last 2 years, when I had the opportunity to be president of the subcommittee of the Social Charter, I saw that in many countries there is dynamics to go further, to ratify, to sign, to reflect how can we do it, not only in the spirit, but also in the words. I totally understand that war means to lose all the social rights at once, and that this becomes a totally dramatic situation. And I think that after war, the most important thing will be to defend the social rights of everybody, also to have a heated home where you can sleep and live with your family. So I understand that the way is long for the social charter, A diamond is also sharp. It demands. It has ambitions. But the social charter is a diamond. And I thank you very much that we celebrate together this diamond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gallet. Does the chairperson of the committee, Ms. Saskia Gruit, wish to speak? I hope so.
Yes, Chair, President, I would like to say something, not in the least about Paul, because you can hear he was not only reporter on this report, but you also chaired the subcommittee for 2 years, and you totally internalized the importance of the social charter and are well equipped to explain why it's so important. The committee has requested this debate to be able to organize an event, and that is important because it is 65 years that we have this charter, that people have access to the rights that come from this charter, and yet we see all over Europe people complaining about their housing, complaining about their work, complaining about livable conditions. It's a cornerstone that protects social justice, democratic stability, and citizens' trust. And it should be address real-life needs, and I feel a bit sad that we do it today. At the end of the day, you are all tired. I can see it. It was a long day. But like Paul said, this is the most important part of our work. If we do not deliver on the social rights, we can forget about it on the other rights. The Charter must be better visible, it must be understandable, and it must be accessible, especially to younger generations. So I have been filming this week my colleagues, and I've been asking, why do you want to come to the PACE Week? Why are you here? And when they come, they all mention the social rights. Some mention human rights, but most mention the social rights. And this was because if I can do it, you all can do it. You can tell about the social rights on your social media and explain that we are not working here only on complex, difficult geopolitical situations, but that we also work on normal things like a house without moist or a house with electricity. And I come to the draft resolution. What does it actually say? Paul already said it. It promotes a ratification. We all should work on that between now and the end of the year, and the protocol on collective complaints. We should help our governments to make instruments to monitor and to implement the social rights, and we should mainstream it. So whenever you talk about housing, don't forget to mention the social charter. The next step is the high-level conference in Chisinau, and that is a political momentum, and that will be in March. So if you want to enthusiase your minister, you have about 6 weeks to do so. So I would say rest well this weekend and start working next week. It has been anonymously adopted, so I can leave here and give you back the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Gruit. Now the debate is closed. The Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development has tabled a draft resolution and a draft recommendation on the 65th anniversary of the European Social Charter, social rights as the foundations of resilient democracies and social justice. They are not amendments, so we can proceed directly to the votes. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution. A simple majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Adopted. And then we will now proceed to vote the draft resolution. The vote is open. I'm sorry. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Okay, it's adopted. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, very good.
Good evening, my fellow representatives, ladies and gentlemen. We can continue our work. I wish you fruitful debate. The next item of business this evening is the debate on the report titled Post-Monitoring Dialogue with North Macedonia, Documentum 16317, presented by Ms. Saibel Arslan and Mr. Joseph O'Reilly on behalf of the Monitoring Committee. In order to finish by 8 p.m., we will interrupt the list of speakers at about 19:45 p.m. to allow time for the reply and the vote. We will begin with Mrs. Arslan and Mr. O'Reilly, co-rapporteurs. You have 5 minutes each now and 5 minutes in total to reply to the debate. I call Mrs. Arslan.
Thank you very much, dear Chair, dear colleagues. On 9th of December 2025, the Monitoring Committee adopted our report on the post-monitoring dialogue with North Macedonia and proposed to close this process after 25 years. Our report is based on the findings of our fact-finding visit to Skopje, on reports from Council of Europe bodies in the European Commission, and information received from the authorities and other external sources. It focused on the issues spotted in the previous Assembly Resolution 2304 2019 on North Macedonia. The functioning of democratic institutions, electoral framework, the situation of the judiciary, the fight against corruption, and the rights of minorities. As regards the functioning of democratic institutions, we conclude that political freedom, including the rights of freedom as association, assembly, and expression, and media pluralism are generally respected. The last parliamentary election took place on 8th of May 2024 and concluded with a victory of the right-wing Vimaro Diplomanea party after 7 years in opposition. Also in spring 2024, a new president was elected following 2 rounds, which led a victory of the Vimaro Diplomanea candidate, Mrs. Gordana Siljanovska-Davkova, who was elected as the first female head of state of North Macedonia. On the 23rd of June 2024, Parliament approved a new government coalition led by Prime Minister Christian Miszkowski. It is in its election observation report, the Assembly concluded that the election was competitive and well run, given the challenge of organizing 2 different elections at the same time and despite some allegations of vote buying and negative rhetoric in the election campaign. In 2025, the Vimaro Diplomanea party won decisively in 2 rounds of local election held on 19th of October and 2nd of November. A delegation from the Council of Local and Regional Authorities observed the election and concludes that they were well run. Regarding the electoral framework, we have noted the urgent need for reform in line with long-standing recommendation from the OSCE, ODIHR, and the Venice Commission. This is particularly pertinent in relation to campaign rules, access to the media, and the allocation of state funding. There are also some issues concerning the voting rights of the diaspora. We acknowledged the government's announcements regarding the reform of the electoral legislations, and we would like to emphasize that is a democratic stake. It is essential that the legal framework facilitates democratic elections. We recognize some process in relation of the judiciary, particularly with regards to ensuring the transparency of the work of the Judicial Council, the requirement of new judges and prosecutors, and the introduction of the automatic court case management information system and other digital case management tools. However, we were announced about the numerous allegations of the politicization of the judiciary, as well as the low level of its perceived judicial independence. The judicially outdated infrastructure and limited financial and human resources are also a case of concern. It has affected the quality and efficiency of justice, which has declined over as the length of processing has increased. We welcome the cooperation of the Minister of Justice with the Venice Committee and hope that the authorities will implement its recommendation concerning the
Thank you, Ms. Arslan. I call Mr. O'Reilly. You have the floor.
In terms of preventing and controlling corruption, the authorities have implemented numerous measures to fulfil the recommendations of GRECO. Nevertheless, corruption remains widespread throughout the public sector, suggesting that the measures taken so far have not been effective. The State Commission for Corruption Prevention is doing its utmost to investigate corruption and report on cases of conflict of interest. But it still lacks the technical resources to operate fully and has lacked committed leadership. Its former president, who resigned last summer, has been officially accused of being embroiled in a fraud scandal. Furthermore, the prosecutor's office, specialising in prosecuting organised crime and corruption, requires additional resources. We note with interest the government's work on the reform of the criminal justice system. We hope that this reform will soon address the negative impact of the changes made into the criminal code adopted in September 2023, following which penalties for some corruption-related offences were removed or reduced. Regarding human rights and the rights of national minorities, there are still some issues to be addressed, particularly concerning the Bulgarian minority, as well as the use of the balancer tool and the application of the law on state languages. We hope that the authorities will soon address these problems in line with the recommendations of Council of Europe monitoring bodies. Progress was also noted as regards the Roma situation by the Commissioner for Human Rights, Michael O'Flaherty, whom I'm proud to say is a compatriot of mine and indeed my colleague there, Senator Ahern, in the front seats, who visited North Macedonia at the same time as us in April 2025. The Commissioner praised North Macedonia for its long-standing commitment to addressing the human rights issues faced by the Roma community. In particular, he commended the adoption of the National Strategy for Roman Inclusion and the measures taken to eradicate statelessness among the Roma population and improve the civil registration. We conclude that North Macedonia is a multi-ethnic, multicultural and multi-confessional country and could serve as a model for other countries in promoting a living together culture and mentality. In terms of respect for human rights, North Macedonia has around 35 pending Court of Human Rights judgments before the Committee of Ministers. Some of these require complex legislative or other execution measures. Examples include the XV, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia judgment, which concerns the lack of legislation on the conditions and procedures for transgender people, for transgender people to change their sex on birth certificates, and the El Masova and others versus North Macedonia judgment, which concerns discrimination against Roma pupils due to segregation in state schools. Although human rights and fundamental freedoms are generally respected, we are nevertheless concerned about the poor conditions in some places of detention, particularly in Izova prison. We note the interest that improving prison conditions is now a priority for the current Minister for Justice, and that an ongoing project on this issue is being implemented with the help of the Council of Europe's Development Bank. To conclude, we are generally satisfied with the progress made by North Macedonia since 2019. At the same time, we propose that the committee re-examine the situation in the country within a few years as part of a periodic review, as some issues still require close attention. After the adoption of our report by the Monitoring Committee, we also held informal consultations with the European institutions which took place in Brussels 2 weeks ago. All of our interlocutors in Brussels have supported our proposal to close the post-monitoring dialogue. They have stressed that North Macedonia remains dedicated to its European and receives considerable financial support from the EU.
Thank you.
Against this fact,
Thank you.
He has no mic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The 5 minutes is over. Yes, thank you, Mr. Riley. We continue with the list. In the debate, I call first Ms. Ryan Fogels on behalf of ALDE Group.
Madam President, dear colleagues, the report before us confirms an important reality. North Macedonia today is a functioning democracy where fundamental rights and freedoms are broadly respected. Elections are competitive and well administered, as I witnessed myself as election observer in 2024. Democratic institutions operate effectively and cooperation with the Council of Europe remains strong. For these reasons, the ALDE Group supports closing the post-monitoring dialogue. This reflects genuine institutional progress and sends a clear message to pro-European and reform-minded actors that commitment and reform do make a difference. However, closing post-monitoring must not be mistaken for ending scrutiny. The Assembly retains its permanent responsibility to uphold Council of Europe standards, as it does for all member states. The end of post-monitoring is not the end of responsibility. It marks a new stage of democratic maturity and accountability. From a liberal perspective, human rights are not a checklist to be completed once and set aside. They require constant political will, resilient institutions, and sustained societal engagement. The report rightly identifies areas where further progress is needed. Judicial independence remains vulnerable to political pressure and limited resources. The fight against corruption must be assessed not by action plans, but by credible investigations, prosecutions, and final court decisions. We also underline that implementing the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights is a core and ongoing obligation. The end of post-monitoring does not reduce North Macedonia's duty, nor that of any member state, to fully and promptly execute court judgments. Particular care must be given to the protection of minority rights in the broadest sense, ethnic, religious, social and sexual minorities. While inter-ethnic relations have improved, serious concerns persist regarding LGBTI rights, including the absence of legal recognition for same-sex couples, incomplete implementation of gender identity-related judgments, and continued incidents of violence and hate speech. A transparent democracy, an open society, and full respect for human dignity are not optional elements of European integration. They are its very foundation. In conclusion, the ALDE Group supports closing the post-monitoring dialogue with North Macedonia. At the same time, we emphasize that this decision comes with expectations, continued reforms, firm respect for the rule of law, and unwavering commitment to human rights for all. We thank the rapporteurs for their efforts and their substantive report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call George Lukaides on behalf of United European Left Group.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our group, the UEL Group, also supports the proposal of our rapporteurs to close the post-monitoring dialogue with North Macedonia, as recommended in the draft resolution before us. The report acknowledges the progress achieved in the functioning of democratic institutions, the conduct of competitive elections, the general respect for fundamental freedoms, as well as continued cooperation with Council of Europe bodies. At the same time, the report is explicit in that a number of key issues remain unresolved. For our group, therefore, closing the post-monitoring dialogue should go hand in hand with the Assembly's continued follow-up through its periodic review mechanism. The report highlights ongoing concerns about the independence, efficiency and funding of the judiciary, as well as the low level of public trust and the risk of political interference. The Assembly rightly emphasises the need for further reforms in line with the Venice Commission's and Greco's recommendations, including those relating to the composition and functioning of the Judicial Council, the provision of adequate financial and human resources, and the implementation of effective anti-corruption measures. The report also highlights ongoing challenges in the field of human rights, notably the situation of the Roma community, the need to end educational segregation, the implementation of judgments of the European Court of Human Rights, prison conditions, and the safeguarding of freedom of expression and media freedom. For the Unified European Left, the conclusion of the monitoring process is a recognition of progress, not a signal of disengagement. The Assembly should continue to support North Macedonia through structured scrutiny, encouraging the further consolidation of democracy, the rule of law and human rights, in accordance with the commitments undertaken as a member state of the Council of Europe. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I call Mr. Piero Fassino on behalf of Socialists.
Thank you, President. I speak Italian. Come hanno ricordato già i colleghi, il rapporto dei nostri rapporteur fa stato di molti progressi che sono stati realizzati nella Macedonia del Nord e di un paese che ha via via consolidato la democrazia, lo Stato di diritto, le regole che presiedono a una vita democratica piena. Tuttavia, i nostri rapporteur hanno anche sottolineato che occorre fare ancora dei passi in avanti su temi che sono cruciali. La lotta alla corruzione, secondo le indicazioni che ha fornito e fornisce il Greco, un completamento delle riforme giudiziarie in ragione tale da garantire effettivamente l'imparzialità e l'indipendenza della giustizia e in relazione a questo anche un intervento sul sistema penitenziario caratterizzato da notevoli criticità, la ridefinizione delle leggi elettorali sulla base anche dei consigli e delle indicazioni che sono venute, che vengono dalla Commissione di Venezia. Persistono anche naturalmente dei problemi che devono essere affrontati circa la consistente comunità Rom che vive in Macedonia e le relazioni con la Bulgaria che, nonostante l'accordo di Prespa, in realtà non hanno trovato ancora una soluzione definitiva ed è un tema che io credo sia molto importante. In ogni caso io penso che il mettere fine al post-monitoraggio sia giusto, accompagnato però da una azione costante di verifica sui progressi che si svolgono in Macedonia circa le questioni che sono ancora aperte e mi pare significativo che la risoluzione finale consigli alla Commissione di monitoraggio di mettere all'ordine del giorno il riesame periodico della Macedonia, proprio per poter costantemente accompagnare l'evoluzione di questo Paese, sostenerla, aiutarla e verificarne gli esiti. E tutto questo è importante per una ragione. La Macedonia è un Paese candidato a entrare nell'Unione Europea ed è evidente che la realizzazione delle riforme che sono indicate significa realizzare processi di convergenza con l'acquis communautaire e con le regole europee che sono essenziali perché l'ingresso della Macedonia, come degli altri paesi dei Balcani occidentali, si possa finalmente realizzare dopo più di 20 anni dall'inizio di questo processo. Per questa ragione sostengo le proposte dei nostri relatori e li ringrazio del lavoro che hanno svolto.
Thank you very much. The next one is Georgios Stamatis on behalf of EPP.
Thank you, Madam President. I speak in Greek language. Κυρίες και κύριοι συνάδελφοι, χαιρετίζουμε την έκθεση ως Ευρωπαϊκό Λαϊκό Κόμμα και συγχαίρουμε τους εισηγητές της έκθεσης. Αυτό όμως που έχει πολύ μεγάλο ενδιαφέρον για την επόμενη μέρα είναι οι παρατηρήσεις αυτής της έκθεσης. Και θα ξεκινήσω από αυτό που είπε μόλις πριν ο κύριος Φασίνο. Η Δημοκρατία της Βόρειας Μακεδονίας έχει υπογράψει μία συνθήκη των Πρεσπών με μία χώρα εταίρο, την Ελλάδα, μέλος του Συμβουλίου της Ευρώπης και της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης. Για να προχωρήσουμε στην επόμενη μέρα, θα πρέπει αυτή η συμφωνία να τηρηθεί όπως έχει υπογραφεί. Και θα πρέπει προφανώς το συνταγματικό όνομα της Βόρειας Μακεδονίας να χρησιμοποιείται όπως ορίζει η συνθήκη. Όσον αφορά την κοινότητα των Ρωμά, επιτρέψτε μου να σας μιλήσω και ως γενικός εισηγητής για τους Ρωμά και ταξιδευτές της Κοινοβουλευτικής Συνέλευσης. Έχουν γίνει όντως κάποιες βελτιώσεις. Θα πρέπει να προχωρήσουμε σε πολύ περισσότερες. Έχει δοθεί μια λύση όσον αφορά την ηθαγένεια, αλλά ακόμα υπάρχουν Ρωμά πολίτες στη Δημοκρατία της Βόρειας Μακεδονίας που δεν έχουν πρόσβαση στο νερό. Και είμαστε εδώ εμείς που ψηφίζουμε για την αναγκαιότητα της πρόσβασης στο νερό. Κάτι άλλο που δεν ελέγχθη είναι η κατάσταση στις φυλακές. Είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό. Εκεί κρίνονται επί της ουσίας οι δημοκρατίες, στους πιο ευάλωτους. Και νομίζω εκεί η Δημοκρατία της Βόρειας Μακεδονίας και στο διάλογο που έχει και μαζί μας, αλλά κυρίως με την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, θα προχωρήσει σε αυτές τις μεταρρυθμίσεις. Το κομμάτι των μέσων μαζικής ενημέρωσης έχει δείξει ότι πλέον υπάρχει ένας πλουραλισμός. Η έκθεση ουσιαστικά τι δείχνει, τις προσπάθειες που κάνει η Βόρεια Μακεδονία να έρθει πιο κοντά στην Ευρώπη. Εμείς είμαστε εδώ να στηρίξουμε τη Βόρεια Μακεδονία και η Βόρεια Μακεδονία θα πρέπει να τρέξει ακόμα πιο γρήγορα σε μεταρρυθμίσεις όσον αφορά τη διαφθορά, όσον αφορά τον πλουραλισμό, όσον αφορά τον σεβασμό των μειονοτήτων και κυρίως όμως όσον αφορά τις αξίες που εμείς εδώ πρεσβεύουμε και σήμερα καλούμαστε να ψηφίσουμε. Το κράτος δικαίου, τα ανθρώπινα δικαιώματα και το κράτος και τη δημοκρατία. Οφείλω να σας πω ότι οι διαδικασίες παρακολούθησης και αυτή η υποστήριξη λογοδοσίας με ενίσχυση τη δημοκρατική κινητοποίηση της δημοκρατίας είναι σε σωστή κατεύθυνση. Και νομίζω ότι είναι μια επίγουσα ανάγκη του εκλογικού πλαισίου που είναι πολύ σημαντικό σύμφωνα με τις συστάσεις του ΟΑΣΕ και της Επιτροπής της Βενετίας. Και εμείς είμαστε εδώ να στηρίξουμε τη Βόρεια Μακεδονία για τα επόμενα βήματα που θέλει να κάνει στην Ευρώπη. Αρκεί οι συστάσεις που υπάρχουν μετά τη λήξη του διαλόγου να γίνουν πράξη. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Thank you very much. I call on behalf of ECPA, Ms. Cristina Gabriela Dumitrescu.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, allow me first of all to congratulate the two rapporteurs for their rigorous, balanced and uncompromising work. The report provides a realistic assessment of the state of the post-monitoring dialogue with the Republic of North Macedonia and clearly indicates both the progress made and the remaining shortcomings. Although there have been developments in certain areas, structural reform remain incomplete and issues such as the independence of the judiciary, the fight against corruption, media freedom and respect for the rights of national minorities still requires attention. In this regard, we draw attention to the need for effective implementation of Peace Recommendation number 1333 from 1997. But in the end, our group support the conclusion of the monitoring procedure. We are convinced that North Macedonia can make tangible progress in the areas monitored, demonstrating that it's a credible partner committed to the fundamental values of our organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. After the spokespersons for political groups, we continue our debate with the speakers list. You have 3 minutes, and I call from North Macedonia, Ms. Bisera Kostadinovska-Stojčevska.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear friends, allow me to first congratulate our 2 rapporteurs who put up with us, and they can finally say after tonight that they are done with North Macedonia, but you're most welcome to visit us in summer in Ohrid. Thank you to all of you that recognized the past and the present efforts of my country. I'm sure that the colleagues from my delegation from North Macedonia will have better speeches than me and will be more formal, because tonight I want to speak from my heart. The closing of this long process for my country is of utmost importance. It signifies that the reward comes at the end if you do not lose sight and clarity, and if you look at the forest and not at the trees. This report is a picture of every single politician that has been and is active since 2000, the year when we entered the post-monitoring process while I was still in high school. This report is a picture of every single decision, every setback, every progress that show that people in North Macedonia want progress, they want democracy, and they know what democracy means, how they reacted when freedom was negated, and how they still react when politicians do not fulfill their needs. And that they will not stop demanding their rights. And that regardless of the party in power, Macedonians know where they belong and want what their government that they elect must do to ensure the progress. My country has been through a lot, from wars that everyone could see and feel, to wars that nobody knew we were or are into. We have faced massive migrations of our future out of the country because politicians failed. We have had our history, identity, language, music, art, and whole being negated. We were told that we are not who we are. Yes, in the 2 world wars and today. But Macedonians do not give up. We take care equally for people living inside and outside North Macedonia, and we strive to make sure they enjoy the same human rights, regardless in which part of the world they live. And we will continue to do that. And indeed, my country has been through a lot. To be more precise, I was born in Yugoslavia, my first child in Macedonia, and my second child in North Macedonia. So the adoption of this report gives me hope that all of the political figures in North Macedonia get the clear sign what they have to do next and allow future generations to live in an European North Macedonia. So now we have to do our homework. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one, Mr. Gareth Ahern from Ireland.
Very much, Madam President. It's very difficult to follow such a powerful and impressive speech. I congratulate you on that. I welcome the opportunity to contribute to today's debate on the post-monitoring dialogue with North Macedonia. And I want to first thank the rapporteurs and the Secretariat for their thorough work and continued engagement. In this context, I would like to offer a particular acknowledgement to my friend and colleague, co-rapporteur, Senator Joseph O'Reilly, for his dedication and balanced approach throughout this process. And it's his experience has contributed meaningfully to the credibility and effectiveness of our engagement with North Macedonia. North Macedonia has demonstrated a sustained commitment to the values of the Council of Europe, often in a complex political and regional environment. I recognise in particular steps taken to improve the functioning of democratic institutions, advanced judicial reform and enhanced media freedom. My fellow Irishman, the Commissioner for Human Rights, Micheál O'Flaherty, has also acknowledged the progress on the rights of the Roman community. These reforms are essential to building public trust in the democratic governance. At the same time, though, the post-monitoring dialogue reminds us that reform is an ongoing process. Continued focus is required on issues such as the independence of the judiciary, the fight against corruption, and the integration and civil liberties of the Bulgarian minority. And as my colleague in the EPP said, Mr. Stamatis, more can be done for the Roman community also. Ireland strongly supports the post-monitoring dialogue as a cooperative and forward-looking instrument, one that encourages progress through partnership, mutual respect, and national ownership of reforms. In closing, Ireland reaffirms its support for North Macedonia's continued engagement with the Council of Europe and for the vital role this organisation plays in strengthening that democracy, the rule of law and human rights across our shared European space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Mr. Denis Begic from Sweden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, I had the opportunity to observe the national election in North Macedonia. What I saw was clear. People vote freely, calmly, and without pressure. But the good election day does not mean that everything in democracy works well. Both OECD and Council of Europe point to important problems: unclear rules for campaign financing, weak transparency in media, limited ways to challenge results, and last-minute changes in election laws. An election can be free, but must be also fair. We see some similar challenges in the rule of law. Courts do not have enough resources, main posts for judges and prosecutors remain empty, and there is still too much political pressure on the justice system. This is not just about institutions. It's about public trust. People must feel that the law applies equally to everyone. The tragic fire in Kočani showed how corruption and weak oversight can cost lives. Those issues cannot be ignored. North Macedonia is a diverse and multi-ethnic society. The country has taken steps to improve minorities' rights, including for Roma communities. But serious problems remain: segregation in schools, poor housing and environment risk. And those must be solved. And they must be solved with the facts, fairness and stability, not through the political pressure or bilateral disputes. For me, as the Swedish parliamentarian, one thing is clear. Long-term democracy support works. The Swedish parliament has worked closely with North Macedonian parliament for years. It is partnership based on respect and dialogue, and it has helped strengthen democracy and institutions. Let us continue that support for North Macedonia's progress. Be honest about the challenges and remain constructive partners. This is how we strengthen democracy in North Macedonia, but also in every other member state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call Ivanka Vasilevska from North Macedonia.
It's okay? Okay. Dear Madam President, dear colleagues, it is an honor to address this assembly today on behalf of my country, a country that has chosen constantly and decisively the path of European values, democratic reform, and constructive cooperation. For 3 decades, our membership in the Council of Europe has been a guiding framework for transformation. This draft resolution before us recognizes not only where we stand today, but also the seriousness with which we have approached our obligations. We see the decision to close the post-monitoring dialogue as a recognition of a long and often demanding reform process carried out with perseverance and responsibility. In 2024, we held competitive, well-organized parliamentary and presidential elections that respected fundamental freedoms and resulted in a peaceful change of power. The election of our first female president stands as a symbol of democratic maturity and social progress. The swift formation of a stable coalition government further confirmed the strength of our institutions. We are proud of our open and transparent cooperation with the Council of Europe, particularly with the Monitoring Committee and the Venice Commission 50 years jubilee. In the fight against corruption, we have made measurable progress. Greco has closed both its fourth and fifth evaluation rounds for North Macedonia, confirming that the majority of recommendations have been implemented. This reflects our firm political will to strengthen integrity, accountability, and public trust. Our institutions, both Parliament, government, are and will remain multi-ethnic and inclusive. We value our diversity as a strength. Dear President, dear colleagues, we do not claim perfection. Reform is a continuous process and we remain fully committed to addressing the remaining challenges. But today's resolution sends an important message that effort, dialogue, and genuine commitment matter. My country will continue to be a constructive partner, a responsible member state, and a strong advocate of the values that unite us in this Assembly. For these reasons, I urge all members to support this draft resolution. It not only acknowledges the progress we have made, but also affirms our commitment to a diverse society that remains united. Let us defend this model, nurture it, and take pride in it. Let us cast a positive vote in favor of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Ms. Iris Luarasi from Albania.
Dear colleagues, on behalf of Albania, I'm very pleased to support this resolution and to warmly congratulate our neighbor, North Macedonia. This country has been in post-monitoring dialogue for more than 2.5 decades, yet this mechanism was never meant to last that long and never intended to become a semi-permanent status. Closing it today is therefore the correct decision and above all, a deserved one. The report before us shows clearly that North Macedonia is a solid, functioning democracy. It shows constructive cooperation with all the Council of Europe monitoring and advisory bodies and meaningful steps to strengthen democratic institutions, human rights, and the rule of law in an inclusive, multi-ethnic society. Like all of us, North Macedonia still faces remaining challenges. But the appropriate way to follow this is through the normal periodic review applied to other state members. Ending the post-monitoring dialogue is a sign of confidence, and I would say that most importantly, it is a sign of respect. For Albania, today's decision sends 3 important messages to our region. First, it recognizes the progress and the maturity of the North Macedonia. Second, it sends strong signals that reform efforts and democratic commitments in Western Balkan are seen, valued, and rewarded. And third, it speaks directly to the European Union. Today, it is more obvious that enlargement of EU with countries of the Western Balkan is a strategic investment in Europe's peace and stability. This message is equally valid when we speak about Kosovo. 2 years ago, the Assembly took a courageous, fair, and forward-looking decision to recommend Kosovo's immediate membership in the Council of Europe. The decision remains pending, and every month of delay keeps Kosovo somehow hostage to subjective justifications that do not reflect our standards or the values and principles that we are talking about. Kosovo's membership is not only a matter of principle, it is an investment in human rights protection, in regional stability, and in the credibility of our organization itself. Dear colleagues, let me conclude by expressing our sincere congratulations to our North Macedonian colleagues here and in Skopje for this important milestone. We hope and wish that 2026 would also find them at the table of the accession negotiations with the European Union. We thank the co-rapporteurs for their excellent work and for the draft resolution before us, which we will firmly vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call Mr. Petr Sokol from Czechia.
Dear Chair, dear rapporteurs, allow me to support the decision to close the post-monitoring dialogue with North Macedonia. I am convinced that North Macedonia is a well-functioning democracy where human rights and fundamental freedoms are generally respected. This is not a given in a situation where Macedonia has undergone a very complicated historical development since its declaration of independence. The country has even experienced violent confrontations on ethnic grounds. This is, of course, a strong call for us to properly monitor the human rights situation. The Republic also had to change its official constitutional name due to external pressure. Relations with its neighbors have significantly complicated the country's integration into NATO and still constitute an obstacle on the path to EU membership. Macedonia absolutely deserves a place in the EU and should not be subject to unnecessary obstacles. Not only for this reason, I would like to commend Macedonia's progress in a number of monetary areas. In the area of elections, I want to emphasize their orderly conduct, the alternation of power, and the other positive steps. There are, of course, parts of the electoral legislation where there are recommendations for improvement, but the character of democratic and free elections cannot be questioned. I would also like to mention the issue of national minorities, which is very sensitive in the country. I am convinced that the issue of citizens belonging to the Bulgarian minority, in particular, should not be instrumentalized in interstate disputes and should be handled in accordance with the usual standards of protection of human and minority rights. I myself come from the country where individual minorities are not explicitly mentioned in the constitution, and I have some doubts that Macedonia should be pressured to do so. However, I clearly condemn all attacks on citizens from Bulgarian minority or other minorities. In conclusion, I would like to once again support the decision to end the post-monitoring dialogue and wish this country further progress. And please, let's not forget geopolitics.
Thank you. And I call Mr. Bekim Kyoku from North Macedonia.
Since 1995, member of Council of Europe, since 2000 in post-monitoring dialogue. But this is a great news. It's a great news for North Macedonia, and it's a great news for Council of Europe. It's also a good news that I'm the last speaker tonight. Madam Chair, distinguished colleagues, today marks an important moment for the Western Balkans. With the conclusion of the post-monitoring dialogue, North Macedonia reaches a significant milestone. This development carries meaning beyond one country. It sends a clear signal of progress for the region as a whole. I would like to sincerely thank the rapporteurs, Ms. Arslan and Mr. O'Reilly, for their thorough, balanced, and constructive report. The Western Balkans should no longer be viewed through the lens of permanent transition. We are an integral part of Europe's democratic space. Today's decision shows that sustained reform and commitment to Council of Europe standards deliver results. As the third country among the Western Balkans 6 to conclude the post-monitoring dialogue, North Macedonia's progress should serve as an encouragement, not as an exception. Stability and democracy in Europe depend on continued advancement across the Western Balkans. At the previous PACE session, we welcomed the conclusion of the post-monitoring dialogue with Bulgaria, our friendly neighboring nation, and that decision sent a positive message for the region and reinforced the credibility of this assembly. In this spirit, we look forward to progress toward the conclusion of the monitoring dialogue for Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia, the completion of post-monitoring dialogues for Albania and Montenegro, and continued firm engagement toward full membership for Kosovo. At the same time, our progress also has a clear geopolitical dimension. North Macedonia is fully aligned with the European Union's common foreign and security policy, reflecting our role as a reliable and responsible European partner. The living together approach recognized in the resolution is central to our multi-ethnic society and democratic stability. European integration is among the three main priorities for the current government. In this context, North Macedonia was among the first candidate countries to receive pre-financing under the growth plan of Western Balkans, and the related reform agenda is being implemented with a strong political commitment. I invite you, therefore, to support the adoption of this resolution as the recognition of progress achieved and as an encouragement for continued reform across the Western Balkans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes the list of speakers. In a moment, I shall call Ms. Arslan and Mr. O'Reilly, co-rapporteurs, to reply. You have 5 minutes in total. First, Mr. O'Reilly, yes, please.
Thank you, Madam President. It falls to me now to make a few valedictory remarks. I want at the outset to thank our professional colleague from the Monitoring Committee's Secretariat, Agnieszka, for her incisive intellect and her academic prowess that she brought to bear professionally on our work. I want to thank my colleague Sybil, who was an excellent co-rapporteur, the North Macedonian delegation, who showed us nothing but courtesy and painstaking efforts to give us honest answers always. The contributors, all of the contributors to the debate tonight, with a special reference to Senator Gavin Ahern, who was coerced into saying what he said. By me, we spoke about coercion earlier tonight. To thank as well Elvira and the Monitoring Committee for their work on this. Now, my good friend Sybil will address some of the more substantive arguments later, but just in the time I have, I'll say that we fully support North Macedonia's bid to join the EU, and we call on all the political parties to find a compromise to implement the French proposal included in the conclusions of the Council of Europe of July 2022. In other words, North Macedonia's constitution should be amended, and I would appeal to the political powers there. We had wonderful speeches tonight from the North Macedonian colleagues, and please give leadership in your country to resolve this, and then we'll get you into the EU. We want you in the EU, and we hope that you can make the change to your constitution. I'll leave it to my wonderful colleague Sybil at this stage. She'll make more substantive remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joe? Dear Chair, we hope that this chamber will approve our proposal to close this post-monitoring dialogue with North Macedonia after 25 years, and we hear it also. Everybody wants that, and this is one of the reasons that you are all still here to also support this report on North Macedonia. Thank you very much to you all. I want to thank also to the North Macedonian delegation who worked really good with us, also our secretary and my co-rapporteur, and to you all. I think the work will go on, but we are on the best way. Thank you very much to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Arslan and Mr. O'Reilly. Does the chairperson of the committee wish to speak? Yes, I give you the floor.
Thank you, distinguished chair, dear colleagues. As we could hear tonight, North Macedonia joined the Council of Europe back in 1995. Until 2000, North Macedonia was subject to the full monitoring procedure, and since 2000, under the post-monitoring dialogue procedure. The previous Assembly's resolution, which was mentioned by our wonderful rapporteur, Resolution 2304,
1929 on North Macedonia dates from 2019, actually. According to the rules, only 2 reports, according to our rules, only 2 reports can be debated within the framework of the post-monitoring dialogue. Therefore, the monitoring committee could only propose either the closing of the post-monitoring dialogue or to return to the full monitoring procedure. And in December last year, 2025, the monitoring committee chose the first option and proposed to close the post-monitoring dialogue after 25 years. North Macedonia's political situation has been characterized by ongoing challenges related to internal reforms, ethnic relations, and its Euro-Atlantic integration ambitions. The country has made significant strides over the past decade, notably resolving a long-standing name dispute with Greece in 2019, which opened the path to NATO membership and closer ties with the European Union. North Macedonia is now a well-functioning democracy where human rights and the rights of national minorities are generally respected. The authorities have made efforts to reform the judiciary and the prosecution services and to fight and prevent corruption. As explained by our really dear co-rapporteurs, both of them, some issues still require close attention. Therefore, the Assembly and its monitoring committee could re-examine the situation in North Macedonia in the near future in light of the recommendations proposed in our committee report. But I can only really sincerely congratulate the North Macedonia's authorities for their efforts and engagement in implementing the necessary reforms despite internal problems such as political fragmentation and frequent shifts in government. Our committee's proposal to close the post-monitoring dialogue now needs to be approved by you, dear colleagues, the Assembly, by this chamber, so we sincerely hope that you will agree with that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, dear Chairperson. The debate is closed. The Monitoring Committee has presented a draft resolution to which 3 amendments have been tabled. They will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium. I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds. I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendment 2, 1 and 3 to the draft resolution, which were rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority, be declared as definitively rejected. Is that so, Madam Chairperson? If no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be rejected. Is there any objection? If no, amendments 2, 1 and 3 to the draft resolution are therefore rejected and will not be called. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in Documentum 16317 as amended. A simple majority is required. The vote is open.
The vote is closed.
The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The draft resolution is adopted unanimously. Congratulations. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow at 10:10 a.m. with the agenda approved on Monday. The sitting is adjourned. Thank you for your hard work. I wish you nice evening and good rest.